Harry Pudding, I guess they could. Yeah, I was looking into getting some copyright-free music, but I'll just settle with some rain, and hopefully that's enough, guys. It's 5 hours long. I don't think the presentation is going to be that long. Don't they have butt armor? They do have butt armor. Okay. Welcome everyone to The Fourth Crusade by me, Cleo Icy. How are you guys doing? I don't think I've asked that yet, but hi everyone. First slide. My name is Cleo Icy, if you are new. I am a history professor. I am now a VTuber, and today I'm going to be talking about the Fourth Crusade, and hopefully you guys enjoy. Maybe you will learn something new about the topic, and I guess I'll go into a brief rundown of what the today's lecture will be about. We're going to open with an introduction of a basic introduction of the people involved with the Fourth Crusade. We're going to look at basically the who, what, where, when, why, how. And then the how section will go into the actual events of the Fourth Crusade. And then once we're done discussing the Fourth Crusade, we will be discussing the sort of analysis-ish of our ancient sources and talking about sort of what went wrong. Because as you probably know about the Fourth Crusade, if you have any sort of knowledge about the Fourth Crusade, it is considered somewhat of a failure because it went a bit pear-shaped from how they originally planned it to be. The Yab Crusade. I suppose. Somewhat, yes. The PvP Crusade. Kind of. But yeah, so the goals of today are, we're going to talk about the Fourth Crusade, we're going to learn about the Fourth Crusade, and hopefully we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about analyzing our ancient sources and how we can use them to create our understanding of what happened. We are going to look at the inherent biases and the reliability of our sources, because that is always an issue with history. Do we have sources that we can trust? And as it comes to the Fourth Crusade, we have quite a few sources, and some of them are a little questionable with either their accuracy or their reliability. Okay, so next slide. Oh, and also we're going to hopefully at the end have a Q&A, so if you guys have any questions, please save them for the end. And we'll also do the, if you have any sort of, anything that you want to ask, you can do it during the breaks as well. I'm probably going to run to the toilet and, like grab water during those breaks. But if you have any questions, then I'll try and answer them, but maybe just save them for the end, guys. Source Pippin isn't the third, trust me, bro. So yeah, moving on to our first section. Oh, okay, so yes, we're going to look at the who, what, when, where, why, and how, which is just a thing that I do for my sort of classes, that it helps break down, it helps introduce all the concepts that we're going to learn today and we're going to discuss today, You find them normally in sort of like journalistic papers. Like you might understand how most journalistic articles are in the form of an upside down triangle where you have all the important information at the top and then it narrows down to the less important information at the end. So I just adopt that for my classes because I find that's a very helpful way to understand the people involved and what happens. Okay, so first up, Hoot. Hoot, guys, Hoot. First up in our cast of characters for the Fourth Crusade is the papacy. Most importantly, it is Pope Innocent III, who was elected Pope on 1198, and he served as Pope until 1216. I think until his death, I believe. So he had an 18-year pontificate, and he was Pope at 38, which is quite young. Pope Innocent the Paste. Not quite. During his reign as Pope, he was one of the most powerful individuals in Europe at the time, and the papacy was probably in the zenith of its power in the end of the 12th, early 13th century. And if you know anything about him, he loved crusades. Oh gosh, let me move my alerts actually, guys. I'll try and move my alerts over here, just so they're not in the way of the slides. So, if you're not aware, Pope Innocent III was responsible for, during his time as Pope, crusading reached unprecedented levels of intensity and diversity with their campaigns. So, most notably, you have the also, guys, I will butcher some pronunciations. I will absolutely butcher some pronunciations of various different French and Italian and Greek words. I apologize in advance. But the crusade against the Cathars in southern France, the Albigensian Crusade, I believe it is, from 1209 to 1218. It's okay to butcher the French and Italians. So yes, that was maybe the big sort of crusade that wasn't a main sort of numbered crusade that you see in the Holy Land. If you're not aware, that was a particularly brutal campaign in which a whole sort of denomination of Christians were completely wiped out in southern France. He also used crusades against his political enemies in southern Italy, which, as you can probably imagine, were also Christians. And as we'll see, as more accent than design against the Christian Byzantine Empire in the Fourth Crusade. Sorry, I took a sip then. Because you guys can't see me, you can't see when I take a break to drink. Crusading fever in Europe was so high that the children got involved. So in 1212, the Children's Crusade happened, in which children from nearby Chartres and Cologne, Chartres is in France and Cologne in Germany, became convinced that they could take Jerusalem. And so they marched through France and Germany and I believe they arrived at Genoa, and then were refused passage to the east because they had no money or equipment. Many of those children actually end up as slaves, but most returned home to be ridiculed for their foolishness. Yeah, so the Children's Crusade is sort of emblematic of the fact that these people loved crusades. They believed that the crusade was a righteous mission that everyone should undergo. And of course, as you can see in the final quote, he believed passionately that God had called the crusades and it was the duty of all Christians, not just the warrior class, to support them. But yeah. The various campaigns that occurred during Innocent's time as Pope showcase just how flexible and adaptable the concept of crusading had become by the 13th century. Okay, moving on. Boop. So, introducing our Crusader characters. Up first, we have Thibaut. I always butcher his name because it's the French version of saying like I think, is it Theobald? I think it's Theobald. Thibaut. I think it is the French version of Theobald. I'm just gonna say Theobald from here on out because that's how I know how to pronounce it. But he was the Count of Champagne, and he was the Count from 1199 to 1201. As you can probably tell, 1201 is before 1204, so unfortunately Theobald does not make it to the Holy Land, and perhaps things might have been a bit different if he did, but we're getting into the realm of alternative history. He was the nephew of the French King Philip II, whose name I think I've actually spelt wrong. I think it's only one L, not two. One sec. Guys, I'm editing on the fly. Shh, you saw nothing. And yes, he was a very charismatic individual. I believe he was very young. I think he was only 21 at the time. And yeah, unfortunately he dies before the crusade happens. I'm taking a sip right now. And so up next is Boniface the First, Count of Montferrat. He was the Count from 1192 to 1207. And he is chosen as the successor to Theobald to lead the Crusades after Theobald's death. He is the cousin, and most importantly, guys, he is the cousin of Philip of Swabia, who was the King of Germany at the time. And the most important thing about Philip of Swabia is that he had married the daughter of the Byzantine Empire, Isaac II. And I also have the squiggle. I have the squiggle, guys. One sec. Ignore all. I thought I'd caught them all. But yes, that will be important in a little bit. But we won't jump ahead too far. Okay. Up next, we also have Louis I, Count of Blois. I think it's Blois. But it just sounds like I'm saying it like Blair. But blah. If you just do a French inflection, it doesn't sound so offensive. Who was Count from 1195 to 1205, so he does survive the Crusades. And he actually fought in the Third Crusade. Blois. And is also nephew of King John of England. Which isn't necessarily important, but shows the sort of stature of these individuals, because king is in King-elect of Germany, yes. So the Holy Roman Empire elected king, yeah. We also have Baldwin the Ninth, Count of Flanders, who, spoiler alert for a little bit later, he ends up becoming the first emperor of the Latin Empire of Constantinople. But he reigns from 1194 to 1205, so he also survives the Crusade. but dies not long after. And then, most importantly, we have our main source for the Crusaders. That is Geoffrey of Villehard. Okay, I practiced this last night on stream, but I'm going to butcher it. Villehardouin. Geoffrey of Villehardouin, who lived from 1150 to 1213. And he was not, by any means, a count. He was a knight for the Count of Champagne. He was actually their marshal. And yes, he wrote in Old French. He is actually one of our oldest sources writing in Old French. As in using that language at all. Okay, that alert's a little bit in the way. One sec, oh god. I'll put it on top of myself, guys. Thank you very much for the follows, guys. I'll get around to saying thank you at the end, for any sort of follows or subscribers. Okay. I'm taking a sip. So yes, obviously, the crusading force was not just 5 men. There were a lot of different crusaders, and don't talk to my daughter ever again. There were lots of different crusaders, and we will be discussing some of those later, especially when we get to the section on our sources. Okay, next slide. So up next, we have the Republic of Venice. I'm queuing all the boos in chat. Boo, boo, boo. Because I imagine some of you guys maybe aren't the most fond of Venice or Enrico Dandolo. But yes, it's my dojo sheet. Yeah, you can't throw stuff at the moment. Sorry, guys. So yes, the Republic of Venice during the time frame of the Fourth Crusade was led by Doge Enrico Dandolo. He reigned from 1192 to 1205. He served as a diplomat for the Republic of Venice prior to being elected Doge. He spent most of his career actually working in sort of Constantinople, but he did work on some other diplomatic missions. But his diplomatic history will be more important later. He's believed to have been elected at the age of 85 because we don't actually know how old he was. We do know he was very, very old. Very old. He was actually blind. He had been blind for at least 20 years prior to the time he was elected. He had a very religious background. If you don't know, he's also from the Dandolo family, which is one of the great families of Venice. So his family was quite wealthy, and yes, so most of these families also had members of their family go into the join the faith, because obviously having individuals like bishops as your uncle is quite useful for sort of religious and political situations. But he had demonstrated a background of being quite pious, which is often sort of neglected when it comes to talking about Enrico Dandolo's involvement in the Fourth Crusade. Still not older than Claire. And then, yes, importantly, a lot of his tenure as Doge, he spent at war or involved in conflict over the city of Zara, which is modern-day Zadar in Croatia. And the conflict involved the Kingdom of Hungary. And yes, if you know a bit about the Fourth Crusade, that will come up in a little bit. Okay. One sec, taking a sip. He was actually buried in the Hagia Sophia. Yes, he was buried in Hagia Sophia. Okay. Introducing the Byzantine Empire. Any Bizaboos in chat? Any Greco-boos? Any Roma-boos in chat? Here are your boys. But introducing the emperors that we will be looking at today. Lots of sips, yes. I will be taking lots of sips. So, first up, we have Alexios III. He is the brother of Isaac II. He actually overthrows Isaac in 1195 and reigns from 1195 to 1203. Komnenos or bust. Unfortunately, the Komnenos are gone by this point. We also have Isaac II. Oh yes, so I can move on to the slide. Hopefully you can see my mouse, guys. Can you see my mouse? Oh. There we go. I can see my mouse. Okay, so this is Alexios III. This is Isaac II. This is Alexios IV. And then I'll move out the way. And this is Alexios V. There is actually someone else. But he's quite insignificant, so we're not going to talk about him too much. Anyway, I'm just going to move this back to the other monitor because I wanted to just make sure that the mouse cursor was showing on screen. Okay. So, first off, we have Alexios. He is the brother of Isaac II. He is the uncle of Alexios IV. And he overthrows his brother whilst Isaac is on a campaign against... I think it's the Bulgarians. If you don't know, the Bulgarians and the Byzantines had a lot of history fighting each other. And so yes, Alexios deposes of his brother. He also then gets his brother captured and blinds him. Oh, I just realized I've got imprisoned by Isaac. I've had Isaac imprisoned by Isaac. Good job, guys. Good thing I can edit on the fly. Okay, so yes. Isaac II is emperor from 1185 to 1195, and then he is deposed of by his brother Alexios III. He is the father of Alexios IV, and after his imprisonment in 1195, he is blinded. How is he blinded? So I will get into that a bit later when we talk about Enrico Dandolo. But the typical method of blinding was through using gouging out the eyes very violently. Sometimes using a hot poker. And so the reason that Alexios has Isaac's eyes gouged is that as part of the law of the Byzantine Empire, blind men were not allowed to rule. So what a lot of Byzantine emperors would do to their political enemies is they would blind them, because then they were ineligible to become emperor. Nor castrated ones either. Yes, that is very true. Thank you, Edward. Where is Justinian? We're a few hundred years after Justinian by this point. Sorry, holla back, Jay. So, our next emperor, Alexios IV, is going to be the one we talk about the most today, because he is... why not just kill them? Why blind? Because that would potentially cause conflict. Not that also blinding them would also cause conflict, but... basically, it's just a way of punishing those individuals without incurring the wrath of sort of their political enemies. Because obviously, if you murder like your brother, it's a little bit. You might get in trouble with the Orthodox faith, or I mean the Christian faith in general. It's a little unchristian of you. Yeah, fratricide is bad, basically. So you can get away with just maiming them and making them ineligible to be emperor. Okay, so Alexios IV. He lives in exile because he He was actually imprisoned along with his father by his uncle, Alexios III. He escapes and goes to live with his brother-in-law, Philip of Swabia, who becomes king of Germany. And most importantly, he convinces the Crusaders to help him retake the Byzantine throne for his father. I don't know why I haven't mentioned that in this slide, but most importantly, he does this for his father in exchange for their support on the expedition to Egypt. He eventually becomes co-emperor with his father when he is installed by the Crusaders, and he is eventually overthrown by Alexios V, and his death is what causes the sack of Constantinople. So, Alexios V of Doukas, I think is how you pronounce his dynastic name. He was the leader of an anti-Latin movement in Constantinople during the year 1204/1203. And he gains support by basically, being anti-Crusader, being anti-Alexios IV. He eventually overthrows him and seizes power. And it is his death. I believe our historical evidence mentions that he personally strangles Alexios IV. But I think that might be disputed whether he had someone else do the dirty work for him or not. And it is his actions that caused the sack of Constantinople. It's like how the prohibition of spilling blood leads to traditions of strangulation and burning at the stake. Yeah, basically. People follow the letter, not the spirit of the law. Yeah. You're allowed to kill as long as you don't spill their blood. Okay. So, those are our 4 main emperors. There is one more character who isn't so important. I will talk about him a bit later. But, slight spoilers, he doesn't actually end up doing much. He gets elected emperor, doesn't want it, and then hides in a church until he dies. That's what happens to him. But yes, we have some squibbies on the screen. So we've got this guy over here, and we had on the Crusader slide, we have this guy over here. These were kindly made for me by Duke Exeter, so thank you very much, Duke, for the squibbies. Okay. So, we're moving on from who now to what. So here is the Fourth Crusade in 7 dot points. We have the initial plan to invade Egypt by attacking the Ayyubid Sultanate. The Ayyubid Sultanate is Saladin. If you remember Saladin from, if you know about the Third Crusade, Saladin's death. It's founded by Saladin, and it's by this point it's still in existence in the early 12th century. No, early 13th century, I should say. But it does not last too long afterwards. Because political history back then was very unstable, as you'll see in the Fourth Crusade. Okay, so part 2 is the failure of the Crusaders to pay their debts to Venice for the fleet that would transport them to Egypt. The city of Zara is sieged and taken by Venice and the Crusaders as part of their payment in 1202. Alexios IV arrives. We'll call him Prince Alexios. He arrives and promises to pay the Crusaders' debts, provide military support in the Holy Land, and mend the relationship between the Church and the Catholic and the Orthodox Church. One sec, I need to take a sip. So, the Crusader party agrees, ships off to Constantinople, and after a siege in 1203, Alexios is installed alongside his father, Isaac II, and they become co-emperors. You need to hit the bed. We'll watch the VOD later. Thank you for coming, Stridulask. As you can probably guess, Alexios IV is unable to fulfill his grandiose promises to the Crusaders, and in a power struggle, Alexios V seizes power. After Alexios V kills Alexios IV, the Crusaders go on to sack Constantinople. And those are the events, not that are the events. Those are the events of the Fourth Crusade. Okay. And then we'll get into, very quickly, the where, when, why, and how. So, where? Our events take place in Venice, in the city of Zara, and in Constantinople. The Fourth Crusade begins in 1204 and ends in wait, I put 2012. This is why you shouldn't make PowerPoints with very little sleep, guys. There you go. I got my numbers the wrong way around. And so why? Why does this all happen, guys? Why does this all happen? Basically, money, incompetent organizing, false promising, poor timing, and religion. But is it a religious endeavor? What do you guys think? Do you think the Crusades were a religious endeavor? Because most historians now argue that Crusades were not so much about religion and more about financial and personal gain. So, how? That is what we are going to discuss today. So, let's get into it. But first, an introduction to our sources. Oh, I'm in the way. One sec, let me move myself out the way. There we go. So, first up, Geoffrey of Villehardouin. He is a French crusader and knight. And most importantly, he is involved in the inner circle of the Crusade leadership. We also have Robert of Clary. He is another French knight and crusader. And his perspective comes from that of a simple knight, more of a regular soldier's perspective. The only issue with his perspective is that, unlike Geoffrey, he does not have access to the sort of inner thoughts and discussion amongst the Crusader leaders. So his source is held at... his source isn't so trustworthy as Geoffrey, but we do use it for some events such as the siege and sack of Constantinople. Sorry, my throat's dying. We have Nicetas Carnitas, who was a Byzantine historian and aristocrat, and he lived from 1155 to 1217. He is a very important source for our understanding of what happened during the 12th and 13th century of Byzantine history. Historians tend to rely on his perspective and his work a lot for the Fourth Crusade, and we will be talking a bit later in detail about why that might not be the best source. Because, as you can probably guess, he does not like the Venetians, and he certainly does not like the Crusaders. And our last main source is actually Pope Innocent III himself, as he wrote quite a few documents about the Fourth Crusade. We also have some of his letters that he sent to the Crusaders, and also his papal papal legate that didn't Francis of Assisi join the Crusade initially? Potentially. I can't remember his involvement. Did he? If he did, he's not really considered that important to the sort of historiography of the Fourth Crusade. Okay. Clear, Nicetas Conitus is shit because he hates Venetians. No. It's more like you have to take into account the inherent biases and beliefs of these individuals and why that would influence their works. Implying you want to learn about the Crusades. Which Crusade was the largest of them? The first. I think the Third Crusade might be the one that involves the most sort of people. You also have later endeavors like the Crusade of Varna, which involved quite a lot of people, but that was quite chaotic and not very successful either. Okay, so we also have, as our sources, we have here the fourth Count of St. Paul, who we don't have when he was born, but he dies in 1205. And his source are his letters that he sent back to Western Europe, mainly to try and gain approval of the actions of the Crusaders in 1203. Because as you can probably tell, attacking the Christian city of Constantinople might not be considered a popular move. We also have the anonymous author of a Soissons, which straight away raises questions about how reliable the source is. But this person, because we don't know who it is, wrote the Devastatio Constantinopolitana, which is a document about the devastation of Constantinople, as you can probably tell. We also have Conrad of Krosigk, who is one of our German sources, I believe. He is the bishop of, I'm going to butcher this, Halberstadt. His journey was written by an anonymous source, so we don't actually know who wrote it, but we do know it is about his actions on the Fourth Crusade. We have Ralph of Coggenshell and Alberic of Trois Fontaines, who are considered ancillary sources for the Fourth Crusade. And so they are mainly used to corroborate our other ancient sources. They are not used they're not really used as standalone evidence for our understanding of the Fourth Crusade. Finally, we have Martin of... I always struggle with it because I want to say Paris. But Paris is a abbey. So Martin was an abbot. And he was the source of Gunther of Paris's Historia Constantinopolitana. Sorry, I'm butchering it. But he actually does not get involved with the siege of Constantinople. He leaves the Crusaders at Zara and goes off to the Holy Land. And he does a little bit of looting, shall we say, in the Holy Land before returning to Constantinople, and then gets involved in the sack of Constantinople. So he was actually he was a member of the clergy, and he gets quite involved with looting relics. Yeah, he did a little bit of looting. And then finally, we have one other Byzantine source, who is Nicholas Mesarites. I'm probably saying that wrong. Who lived from 1163 to 1216. He was a Byzantine churchman. I don't remember specifically what his rank was, but he is another perspective aside from Nicholas about the atrocities of the Crusaders during the sack of Constantinople. Okay, it's called salvaging. Okay, so getting into our journey of the Crusade. Oh, I already mentioned all this. Damn it, I got ahead of myself, guys. So yes, we have Innocent III and the crusading fever of the 13th century Europe. So we had the Crusade in 1209 to 1218 against the Cathar heretics in southern France. He also encourages the continuation of the reconquest of Spain against the Muslim south. We have the defeat of the Spanish in 1195 at the Battle of Alarcos. I don't know why that's got the squiggly. And also, he encourages further crusading in the northeast of Europe against the various Rus and into sort of beyond Sweden into northern Scandinavia sort of regions. Because by that time, these people, the Baltic peoples basically. By that time, most people in Europe were Catholic, but you still had some evil heretics that had to be converted or killed. We also had the Children's Crusade, which I mentioned was a bit of a pipe dream by some kids. And never went anywhere. The Baltics were the last pagans, yes. Yes. And so yes, we have his political enemies were also targets of crusades in southern Italy. I believe one adventurer, if I can find my notes, there was a German adventurer called Marquard of Awelia in 1195, who was trying to establish a power base in Sicily and formed an alliance with the Muslim colonies in Sicily. And so Pope Innocent III caused a crusade against Marquard because of his allegiance to the Muslims. Doesn't go anywhere. That guy was your dad, right? Doesn't go anywhere. No one actually listens to him, but he also calls a crusade against the Spanish rulers who ally themselves with the Muslims, because in the Spanish region you had conflict between the Christians and Muslims, but also conflicts against Christians and Christians. And so you have, as far back as Pope Celestine was granting crusading indulgences to those who opposed a Christian ruler who allied the Muslims. He also have popes calling crusades against King Roger II of Sicily, basically granting the same remissions of sins for crusaders to attack Christians. So the events of the Fourth Crusade are not unheard of crusaders attacking Christians. It is not a new concept for the Fourth Crusade to be attacking fellow Christians. So yeah, it was actually Pope Celestine III who called a crusade against King Alfonso the Ninth of Leon, because he allied the Almohads, the Muslim Almohads. To be fair, Roger II were Normans. Those guys were notorious. Yes, they were. They were a little bit warlike. and also very much rivals the Pope. Yes. So yes, Pope Innocent and his predecessors were getting involved with targeting Christian nations and excommunicating them and offering indulgences of sins for those who would attack them, because guess what? The Pope had political enemies and used his religious station to try and influence European politics. That is not an uncommon occurrence. He wasn't just a holy man that, worshipped God and told people to be kind to each other, like you see in modern popes. So yes, Pope Innocent III blamed the Third Crusade as a failure on the parts of the monarchs for not taking back Jerusalem. As you can see in the slide, this is a map of the Crusader states in 1200. The Crusaders actually did what... I'm getting tongue-tied. The Crusaders were actually victorious. Prior to the Third Crusade, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was isolated to, I believe, just Tyre, the city of Tyre, which is in the middle there. When Cleo says a little bit or the same effect, she means a fuck ton. Thank you. Yes, the Pope had their own agendas, they had their own warriors, they had their own armies. And yes, they would blame the secular rulers for their failures, because obviously Pope Innocent III wanted Jerusalem to be back in the hands of the Christians. But as you can see from this map, the Ayyubids still were in control of Jerusalem. But the Third Crusade had resulted in the territory of the Kingdom of Jerusalem growing dramatically. And the German Crusade in the 1196 and 1197, they, I believe, resulted in the capture of Beirut. So they were actually quite successful, but not successful enough. So yes, Innocent III puts out the Post Miserable, or Miserabile, I should say, which is basically him whining about the fact that the Christians had failed the Holy Land, Jerusalem was still in the hand of the Muslims, and that we needed to do something to resolve that. So, you get the onset of the Fourth Crusade. So the call for a new crusade happens in November 1198 at the tournament of Eclé-sur-Aisne. I'm saying that wrong, I'm sorry, in the county of Champagne. So why does it happen at a tournament? Wait, hold up. We're learning about crusades, let's go. Yes, hello snail mail, welcome. We're learning about the crusade. As you can see in this picture on the slide, the little mark here, this is where the tournament was held, in northern France. Why was the crusade... Automod actually helped. Thank you, Automod. So why was the crusade called at this tournament? You have the issue that was going on in Western Europe, that basically all the monarchs were busy. And all prior crusades involved one or multiple monarch in helping with the organization and funding of the crusade. The Fourth Crusade is very different. We have a situation where all of the monarchs in Europe, all of our main monarchs, so Spain, hang on, let me just double check I don't talk about this in detail. No. So we have all of our monarchs in Europe are busy. Oh, I've skipped a little bit about Innocent's Post Miserable. So yeah, let me go back to my notes 1 sec and go back a slide, guys. I've jumped forwards. Okay. So his document, the Post Miserabile, it depicted the loss of holy places and sharply criticized the self-centered conflicts between England, France, and Germany. He urged the people of the West to trust in God, to remember the sacrifices that Christ had made for humankind, and to think of the eternal treasures that their service would merit. And so he also set aside various measures that people who were not able to fight could contribute in future crusading endeavors. So they could provide men or money, and asked for those that could not go on crusade in person but could pay for suitable warriors to go in their place and receive remission of their sins too. So you could pay other people to go on the crusade for you, and one sec, I need to put the light on. It's very dark in here. Doxy information on Amaranth. Oh, okay. So hopefully that person doesn't then... I wonder if that's like... Right, okay. So it's probably someone who's like, haha, I'll troll by posting dox information and then report the channel. Maybe something like that. Well, I guess we'll find out if my stream suddenly gets banned, guys. Hopefully not. Anyway, that's fun. I just want to talk about history. Yeah. If the stream ends, then, welp. Okay. So yes. We move into why was the Crusade called in at a tournament instead of involving the monarchs. So, Richard the Lionheart dies in April 1119. Not 1119, 1199. King Philip of France is basically involved in tensions over his marital status. And those two issues sort of prevent both England and France getting involved in the Fourth Crusade. England and France are also at conflict with each other during this time point. So they're a little busy. They can't take part in the Crusade. The Spanish had suffered defeats in their reconquest against the Muslims and were therefore not available for the Crusade either. And also the succession of the imperial throne in the Holy Roman Empire and in Germany was being disputed, and so there was no monarch that they could rely on to recruit for the Fourth Crusade in Germany. So yes. Oh, one sec, my throat's dying. As always, even right now too. So yes, we have the tournament at Ecley-sur-Aisne, and this is where the Crusade is preached. And you get our first sort of members of the Crusade taking the cross and joining the cause, which is a very unusual place to actually preach a crusade, because the church condemned tournaments, because these were events that incited the sins of pride, envy, and murder, which obviously went against Christian teachings. But obviously these tournaments were very important for the fighting men to practice, as it was their best chance of getting experience in fighting without going on campaign. So you have this curious case of the church needing to recruit people for Innocent's campaign or crusade that he wanted to go on, but having to maybe look the other way when it comes to the actions of the individuals that they're recruiting. So yes, we get a tournament, and at the Crusade, the appeal for the Crusade is heard, and Theobald of Champagne and Louis of Blois both join. They both come from sort of famous crusading lineages. Theobald's father ruled Jerusalem from 1192 to 1197, and Louis took part in the Third Crusade. And we also have, because Theobald gets involved, we also have Geoffrey involved. So Old Mate Geoffrey, our primary source for the Fourth Crusade, is recruited at this gathering. I do actually cover it on the slide. Yes, so Baldwin of Flanders joins a few months after the tournament. But yes, the Crusade is already off to a shaky start because there are no monarchs involved. And you might be wondering why the monarchs are important. Well, basically, they supplied the most men. They also supplied the most money to fund the operation. So relying on lesser lords and lower rank nobility, you already are at a disadvantage for both recruiting for the Crusade and funding it. So it is at this event, it is at this tournament that the Crusaders set about organizing the passage to the Holy Land, and also the plans for the campaign, which involves going to Egypt. And so it is at this organization that they involve the Republic of Venice. And Geoffrey of Villehardouin is involved as a diplomat, involved in organizing the recruitment of Venice to the cause. So, the beginning of the Venetian involvement. Actually, no, I have skipped forward a bit. The leaders of the Crusade, of the people involved that I mentioned earlier, they actually meet at Soissons, and that is where they decide to, one, go for Egypt, and two, involve the Venetians. So yes, here we go. Envoys are sent to Venice in 1201, and they are greeted by Enrico Dandolo. It takes them 7 days to deliberate on getting involved in the Crusade. Because, as you can probably tell, funding a navy to ship what is believed to be a force of 30,000 men involves a lot of construction and financial commitment to organize. So yes, the Venetians take a very long time to get back and decide to eventually agree to build the fleet to construct. They agree to construct the fleet and ship the Crusaders off to Egypt. So what was the final fee? The final fee was 85,000 silver marks, which is, if you're not aware, that is a lot of money. It's over double what the French and British kings paid for their involvement in the Third Crusade. So you can already see that this endeavor is very expensive. But this is also because the Crusaders, the diplomats for the Crusaders, argue that they believe they will get 30,000 soldiers recruited for their cause. And so they believe that they can afford this. Spoiler alert. They don't. So as you can see in the map, that is the original proposed Crusader route. So they arrive in Egypt, build up a power base in Alexandria and the Nile and Cairo, and then march on to Jerusalem from there. Quick, how do you adjust that for inflation? Can you put a price on eternal salvation? Apparently you can. So yes, why did the Venetians agree to the deal? Well, the allure of the conquest of Alexandria is a big draw. So Alexandria was a city that the Venetians had very little influence over. Many of its political rivals, the other Italian republics, were they were more involved in the Fourth Crusade. They were more involved in Alexandria and the Egyptian region. So, for the Venetians to get a leg up on their rivals, attacking the Nile and provided Venice with the perfect opportunity to build up their own influence in Alexandria if it was controlled by Crusaders that they assisted with their transportation. So basically, from the get-go, the Venetians are already financially motivated because taking Alexandria would mean they would gain a lot of wealth and influence in that city, which would, of course, line their own pockets. And so yes, if you're not aware, the Italian Republic served a very important role for Crusaders as they connected Europe to the Holy Land. And the Venetians actually had an agreement with the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1124 after their involvement in their own crusading endeavor in 1123, called the Venetian Crusade, in which they saved the city of Tyre from falling. And the Kingdom of Jerusalem awarded them with the Pactum War Mundi, which is it was a trade agreement that allowed the Venetians to have their own sort of district within Crusader cities. They would be exempt from taxes in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and they would also be tried under Venetian law. And if any sort of Venetians were shipwrecked or died off in Jerusalem, their wealth and their body would be shipped back to Venice and not seized by the King of Jerusalem. So it was very, very favorable terms to the Venetians. And so having those sorts of agreements in Alexandria would be perfect for the Venetians. But yes, as you can probably tell, the promise by the Crusaders of the Fourth Crusade were over double what Frederick Barbarossa had committed in 1189 and 1190, who only committed 12,500 men. No, not 12,000, 12 to 15,000 men, whereas these Crusaders, despite not being monarchs and not having as much power as the King of Germany, were promising that they could get double the amount of men to go on their endeavor, which is ambitious. It's quite ambitious. And as you can probably tell, they don't succeed. Go to my notes. So yes, the Venetians agree with the plan to attack Egypt instead of going directly to the Holy Land, as the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Ayyubids actually had a truce. Actually, no, that doesn't work. They had a truce with the Muslims in Syria rather than the Ayyubids in Egypt. So attacking Egypt allowed them to allowed them to circumvent the treaty and truce that the Kingdom of Jerusalem had with its Muslim enemies. So obviously, gaining trade in one of the biggest trading hubs in Europe, or the Mediterranean rather, is a exceptionally lucrative deal for the Venetians, and so they accept. And so we have the Venetians involved. So from 1201 to 1202, the Venetians dedicate their entire economy to constructing a fleet of about 200 ships to be constructed for the Crusaders, to ship them to Egypt and then the Holy Land. And so yes, the envoys make a down payment with the Venetians to begin working on the fleet and then head back to France. It is around this time in 1201 that... one sec, get my slides up. Okay, yeah, there we go. Moving on. So Theobald of Champagne dies in 1201, which is a bit of a setback for the Fourth Crusade, as its charismatic young leader has already died before any action has occurred. And basically he was a very popular figure in Western Europe, and so his death is seen as a pretty big blow because there was a lot of hope for him to recruit the 30,000 soldiers to fight for the Crusade. So Boniface of Montferrat is chosen as his successor, who then travels to his cousin in Germany, so Philip of Swabia, to try and recruit more men. It is here that he meets Prince Alexios of the Byzantines. Okay. And I'm just going to take a quick break here, guys, because it has been over an hour. So I'm just going to refill my water, and we'll get back to it in about 5 minutes. If that is okay. Has it? Yes, it has been an hour already. We are 16 slides in, and it has been an hour. So we are actually making some decent progress. What language would they have spoken to each other? Latin? No. They would have spoken French, German, Italian. A lot of these people were bilingual, trilingual, multilingual. Also, the differences in the languages back then weren't as different as they are now. So these people were able to communicate with each other. What was I going to add? Okay, I was going to add a little text. Okay, we'll do 5-minute break. Oh, I can't type. Hopefully it hasn't been too bad, guys. I know I'm very nervous. I am very nervous about doing this on Twitch. I am much more comfortable doing this on Zoom because I have a lot of the stuff also prepared for me in advance, whereas this is me sort of going off all the notes that I've gathered, and it's a little bit scuffed. And I'm having to flip through all my notes that I have, because I have all these sources open, and yes, this is great. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Okay, I'm just going to refill my water because it's empty, and also I need to go to the toilet because You know, French being the court language of Europe was a thing, but you're under the impression it was more of a 1600s thing onwards. Most of these people could speak multiple languages. The nobility were able to all communicate. The image of the dumb crusader and the dumb warrior knight and all that it's a little bit inaccurate. A lot of these people, a lot of our nobility were actually educated in how to write Latin, which is why we have sources like Geoffrey. Writing in, well, actually, Geoffrey wrote in Old French, but our other sources were writing in Latin because they were being educated in how to read and write. Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna quickly go to the toilet and then grab some water and then we'll get back into it. Okay, so we'll just go from the top. Theobald dies in 1201. The young charismatic leader of the Crusade dies. That is not good for the prospects of recruiting more soldiers for the war effort, as you need these enigmatic figures. Otherwise, you need these enigmatic figures, or you need a monarch who comes pre-booked with their own army, which is as the case in the previous Crusades. Yes, so Boniface of Montferrat is chosen as his successor. He travels to visit his brother to try and his cousin, to try and recruit him for the war effort, and is unsuccessful, but there meets Prince Alexios of the Byzantines. As you know, Alexios was in the West because his father, Emperor Isaac, had been deposed by his brother, and in accordance with custom, Isaac had been blinded to make him ineligible to rule, and Alexios had been imprisoned. He escaped and had been fleeing to the various Western European countries to try and get support for reinstating his father and also his rightful position as Prince of the Byzantines. Unfortunately, very few people were willing to listen to him. The only reason he was able to stay with Philip was because his sister had married Philip. He had even visited the Pope, but the Pope had refused any support for Alexios in the past. And also, another reason for not supporting Alexios was the fact that his father had very brutally overthrown the Khomeini dynasty in the mid-1180s themselves, and also had allied with Saladin. So obviously, as we discussed earlier, allying with the Muslims was not a thing that the Christians and the Pope were particularly fond of. So these were all sort of held against him, and why he was unable to get any sort of support. And we'll hear from him in a little bit. Okay. Yes, between 1201 and 1202, the Crusaders are attempting to recruit for their cause. And by August of 1202, the total number of troops that have shown up are 12,000 of the original 33,000 men that were promised. And as you're aware, because there was no monarch involved in the funding and organization of finding troops, there is no one figure to pay for this massive sum of money that the Venetians are owed. So basically, the plan was for the Crusaders were that every soldier would pay their own way. As you can imagine, when you're trying to rely on every soldier paying their own way, you need all 33,000 men to show up. So when only 12,000 men show up, they are drastically short. They do manage to scrounge up some money, but they still end up short 34,000 marks, which is a lot of money. Now, obviously, the Venetians were not happy with this. They had dedicated their entire year to construction and fitting of this entire fleet for the Crusaders. And they show up with a third of the amount of troops that they had promised, and also still owed them a massive amount of money. So what did the Venetians do? Well, they promised to take part in the crusade. Over 10,000 Venetians joined the Crusader force. And Enrico Dandolo, the Doge, suggests that if he lends the remaining money from the Venetian state, if the Crusaders promise that the first gains of the crusade goes to paying off their debt, then they will agree to waive the fee and take part. Which, obviously, the Crusaders have no choice, but they have to accept. Because there's no other way they're getting the money, there's no other way they're going to get the men. So, they agree. So over 10,000 Venetians take the cross, and the Venetians are now involved in the crusade. So, what does Enrico Dandolo suggest should happen? By now, it is September in... Yes, it was September, yeah, okay, so by the time that the Venetians have taken the cross, the Venetians of... Why is this lecture being recorded in a thunderstorm? I needed something relaxing in the background, because I didn't want to do this in complete silence. But I didn't want... because I want to upload this to YouTube after I'm done, so it'll be... I can't have any copyright material in the background, so that's why it's rain, because I'm pretty sure no one has the copyright for rain. I hope not. But yeah, we needed something in the background, and rain was the easiest thing that I could find. You'd be surprised? Oh no. Well, maybe I do a second recording, an edited recording, and post that on YouTube instead of this stream. Okay. So, we find ourselves with a sizable force, a sizable chunk of the crusade. The Crusaders are now Venetian soldiers, and we also have Enrico Dandolo at the leadership table. So where does that end us, guys? Where does that end up? By the time they've organized this, it is September. If you don't know about sailing on the Mediterranean during winter, basically the weather of the Mediterranean was too unstable and too dangerous to sail over the Mediterranean. The best they can do is follow the coastline. If they deviate too far from the coastline, you risk getting involved in storms and sinking, which is what happens in, I believe, to Barbarossa. Frederick Barbarossa, he gets stuck in a storm and sinks and dies because of his crusade. Yes, they were vulnerable to earth, wind, and fire in September. Yes, very funny. So yes. It's too dangerous to sail across the Mediterranean in winter, in the ships that they had back then. So ships back then were galleys. They sat a lot lower into the water, and it was definitely way too treacherous to sail in the Mediterranean winter. So what do? They need to winter at a nearby port that is loyal to or friendly to the Crusaders or the Venetians. So what does Enrico Dandolo suggest? He suggests they should winter at Zara. Oh, that's not the PowerPoint. There we go. So, the city of Zara. Oof. Sorry, let me adjust. You thought Barbarossa fell in a river and died. Oh, right. Oh, roommates are back. One sec. You are correct. You are correct. I got mixed up. I forget who drowned sailing across the Mediterranean. Ah. My bad, guys. A bunch of people did. A lot of people did. But yeah. Okay. Boop. Okay. Ignore that I said that, guys. Ignore that I said that. Okay, so in October 2012, not 2012, in October 1202, the Venetian fleet sails from Venice, along with the Crusaders. Robert of Clary, one of our primary sources for the Fourth Crusade, or contemporary sources, I should say, not primary source. One of our contemporary sources for the Fourth Crusade describes it as the finest thing that has ever been seen since the beginning of the world. So it's about 200 ships, all sailing at once. Imagine all the regalia, all the flags, all the banners. It would have been very impressive. So they begin sailing towards Zara because the Venetians need to, not the Venetians, the Crusaders and the Venetians, they need to find a safe port to harbour in for the winter. Enrico Dandolo suggests Zara, which actually might have not been the safest choice for the Venetians because they are technically still at war with the city. Or rather, they had past conflicts, not that they were still at war, sorry. This point, Pope Innocent III actually finds out that they are off to Zara, and he threatens them with excommunication if they attack, because he knows of the Venetians' dispute with the city, and he knows that the Venetians were suggesting that part of what the Crusaders can do to pay off their debts is to take the city back into Venetian control. Oh, you are right, that guy does have his butt quite on display. Okay, so he sends Peter of Capuano to try and dissuade the Crusaders from attacking the city of Zara. So yes, Zara was a former city controlled by the Venetians that had broken free of their control. It had then fallen under the protection of Hungary. And King Bela of Hungary had actually decided to take the cross. So he was actually going to commit to the crusade. But he did not arrive in Venice. So he was going to take part at a later date. Yes, so the King of Hungary was also the King of Croatia. If you're not aware, Zara is modern-day Zadar in Croatia. I believe I have... I'm just double-checking my next slide. Yep, okay. So yes. Peter was with the crusading army. And so he understood the dilemma of the Crusaders, that they owed the Venetians a lot of money and this is part of how they could pay off their debt to the Venetians. Obviously, this decision to attack a Christian city is very controversial amongst the Crusaders. But ultimately, the leadership of the Crusaders decide, okay, we will attack Zara for the Venetians and help pay off our own debt. Not everyone agrees with that. Simon de Montfort is one of our famous examples of not agreeing with attacking Christians. He sits out of the siege and very quickly the city surrenders on the 13th of November 1202 because the Crusaders have a lot of siege weapons, and so the city basically stands zero chance of survival. Obviously they tried to plead to the Crusaders, hey, we're a Christian city. Why are you attacking us? You're Crusaders. We're Christians. Why are you attacking us? But unfortunately, the need to pay off their debts was more important than the pleas of Christians and the pleas of the Pope. So, obviously, Innocent III is a little bit upset and writes to the Crusaders saying, "Behold, your gold has turned it into base metal, and your silver has almost completely rusted since, departing from the purity of your plan and turning aside from the path onto the impassable road. You should have hastened to the land flowing with milk and honey. You turned away, going astray in the direction of the desert." Oh, I don't have my source for that. One sec. Innocent III, 2000, 41 to 45. There you go, guys. Sorry about that. There's the reference. Oh, I typed. So very quickly, we encounter the limitations of papal control over the Crusaders. Previous Crusades were led typically by the secular leaders, the monarchs like the kings of France, the kings of England, the kings of Germany, and so you don't have the Pope being directly in control. That is what Pope Innocent tried to change this time, because of, in his eyes, the failures of the Third Crusade were because of the secular rulers. And so he tried to take more direct control, which is another reason why he he called upon the counts rather than the monarchs to help in the organization of the crusade, because he wanted more control for himself. Basically, yes, no, don't attack the Christians, you're too sexy, haha, that meme. But evidently, his pleas fall on deaf ears. His own legate, yeah. His own legate bloody disagrees with him and refuses to pass on the message that he disapproves of their actions. Legate. Yeah, I don't know why I always struggle with pronunciations, guys. So he excommunicates the entire crusading army for their sinful actions. But yeah, the practicalities of an ongoing military expedition relied upon consent, but the French Crusaders' contractual failure, coupled with the Venetians' threat to withdraw their naval obligation, meant that they needed to sustain the crusade in the first instance won that day. So, the crusade is off to a great start. They've already attacked and taken a Christian city on behalf of the Venetians. Let me double check my slides. It's very difficult because I have to have OBS open. Also, I think, oh, did I accidentally move that up? Yeah, I did. Alexios. Here is our most important figure for the Fourth Crusade. And it is Prince Alexios who is responsible for everything going tits up, basically. So one sec, I just need to close the door. So, Prince Alexios is a little bit ambitious. One might say a little too ambitious with his aims and goals and promises. So he arrives in Zara in the winter of 1202. And he has a pitch for the leadership of the Crusade, and it's designed to get everyone on board. The Pope Innocent, he promises the submission of the Greek Orthodox Church to the Catholic Western Church. Something that a lot of the popes had desired for a very, very long time. They wanted to mend the schism and unify the Church. Obviously, the Pope would be quite ecstatic at that. He also promised both money to pay off the Venetian debt, of which the original Venetian debt was 34,000 silver marks. He promises a payment of 200,000 marks to the Venetians to settle their debt. 200,000 marks compared to 34,000 marks. You would have to be insane to think that we don't want 200,000 marks. Of course, the Venetians are going to be very tempted by the fact that he has just offered them 200,000 marks in payment. And then he offers the Crusaders themselves 10,000 extra men to support in the Crusade in Egypt, and 500 knights stationed in all across the castles of the Holy Land to help protect it. Which, of course, when the crusading army is only 22,000 strong, and they've already had some men leave them at this point. And historians tend to argue about how many soldiers left the main crusading force in Zara after they were horrified by the fact that they had attacked Christians. We don't know, unfortunately. We just have to sort of make guesstimations about. Some people say maybe 1/10 of the army had left. Some people say, only 500 soldiers left, which would be about a 20th of the... Well, actually, it'd be under the 20th of the original crusading forces. He sounds like an American politician. He offers a very good deal. So, the important thing to note of this is Prince Alexios had spent the last 8 years in exile. He personally has not seen the state of Constantinople, and he couldn't possibly know how much money or how big the army was, how big the navy was. So he makes a massive overestimation about how much he can personally support the Crusades with. And what does he ask in favor? He asks for his father to be reinstated as Emperor of the Byzantine Empire. It's the best deal. Basically, it sounds good. It almost sounds too good to be true. and we will get into that in a little bit. Obviously, the prospect of attacking another Christian city did not dwell well with a lot of the Crusaders. Let me just double check. Yep, okay. Just gonna skip forwards. No, I think we can move to the next slide. Okay, yes. I was right. I always forget. I'm always terrible about organizing my slides and making sure that I'm moving on to the next point. You're on the edge of your seats. Art of the deal, yeah, basically. Alexios, bit of an idiot. If you're not aware, he's very young. I believe he's 20. He's in his early 20s by the time he arrives at Zara. So yes. The fact that Alexios had been imprisoned, his father had been wrongfully dispossessed of the throne, is a significant sort of fact when it comes to the Crusaders. And I can move myself a little bit back on screen. I'm no longer needing to be half off screen. Yes. So, it was a central element of crusading, the reclamation of lost land that was wrongfully taken, as decreed by Urban II. So, when it comes to the Crusaders deciding what they should do, when they look at that interpretation of the crusading decree by Urban, technically, they are reclaiming lost land. They are reinstating a Christian onto the throne of a country that they were dispossessed from. So, that is a key sort of justification that the Crusaders make back then. This is where you get the issue of Enrico Dandolo and him having secret possible motives for wanting to be enthusiastic about this deal. Because yes, he's very enthusiastic. But for now, just the prospect of him being his debt paid in full and receiving, what, an extra 160,000 silver marks? Obviously, you would be a fool to say, no, I don't want that. And we will get into more about Dandolo's enthusiasm for the plan later in the presentation. But obviously, some of you may know about events in 1171 and events in 1182. Of course, not everyone agreed with this. Simon de Montfort and other knights eventually go on their own way to journey to the Holy Land. So they don't go to Constantinople and they don't go to Egypt. They just eventually end up in Tyre, Acre, those sorts of places. So when does crypto enter the equation? Probably not for a while. But yes, most of our French Crusaders are actually enthusiastic for the agreement as well. So Baldwin, Geoffrey Vauhardouin, I believe, what's his face? So, hang on, now I'm getting my own names confused. Hang on one sec, guys. Where's my PowerPoint? Boniface is also quite enthusiastic for the agreement, and as is Louis I. So basically, all of our major players in the Crusading army, all of the major leaders in the Crusader host, are all enthusiastic for... oh, I didn't mean to click and drag there. They're all very enthusiastic for the plan. So they agree. They agree. In the meantime, Pope Innocent III had released the French Crusaders from their excommunication on condition that they performed penance for their sins. Obviously, the prospect that the Crusaders are now off to attack another Christian city does not bode well with Pope Innocent. So this excommunication is somewhat short-lived, but he also doesn't remove the excommunication, rather, from the Venetians, who were supposedly unapologetic and therefore outside the church. Sorry, one sec, guys. So, Pope Innocent demands that the men should neither invade nor violate the lands of Christians in any manner, unless, perchance, they wickedly impede your journey, or another just or necessary cause should perhaps arise, on account of which you would be empowered to act otherwise. Intentionally or not, Pope Innocent III, including the cause a just and necessary cause, provides a loophole for the Crusaders to justify their future actions, and also to, almost certainly in error, infers papal support for their decisions. So, should have sacked Venice instead. Yeah, I guess. So, we arrive. First siege of Constantinople. The Crusading army sails to Corfu, and then in late May, from Corfu, they sail to Constantinople. The Crusaders arrive at the city with Geoffrey Villehardouin proclaiming that Constantinople was the queen of cities. But despite that, both the city and the empire had been in a severe decline. As you can see on the slide, for almost 80 years, there were only a few sort of political troubles that the empire faced. But from the onset of 1180 to 1204, there were 58 different rebellions and conspiracies, which basically goes to show that the empire was exceptionally unstable at this point. Yeah, that's more than 2 a year. Yeah. And yes, so the crusade at this point is not necessarily off the rails. Technically. Technically, they are still very much keeping with the plan. The plan has changed, but there still is the goal that they quickly handle the business in Constantinople, and then they go on to the Holy Land once they've got the support of the Byzantines. That is what the Crusaders were hoping for. Obviously, it doesn't turn out like that. So yes, the Crusaders actually parade the prince outside the city of Constantinople, saying, "Behold your natural lord." But the inhabitants of the city do not care at all. They do not give an absolute hoot about who Alexios is, because Alexios III, the current emperor of the Byzantines, had actually managed to exploit a century of tension between the Byzantines and the Crusaders to nurture the notion that the prince and his Western allies planned to enslave the Greeks and subjugate them to the Pope. Which, technically, he's not so wrong about the second point. The fact that Prince Alexios had also never governed Constantinople, as well as his youth and his lengthy absence, all meant that he lacked the support of the common people, and so all of the efforts of the Crusaders to try and get the city to install Alexios peacefully failed. I should say Prince Alexios, so we don't get confused between Alexios and Alexios. So yes, we find ourselves with the Crusaders. We have no choice but to attack. But they have a justification. They've just heard from the Pope that this was a necessary and just cause. So, we have a siege that begins in the 11th of July, 1204. How does the battle present? We'll go into that in a little bit of detail. I guess we'll rewind time a little bit. Blah, 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 blah. So on the 3rd of July, 1203, the Crusaders, praying for their victory as they steeled themselves for the largest amphibious landing yet attempted by Western forces in the medieval age. The fleet crosses the Bosphorus, and as the boats near the shore, the Crusaders' archers and crossbowmen set up a hail of covering fire. Once the ships reach the shallows of the horse transports, open their doors, and mounted knights charge out. Curiously, Emperor Alexios' troops were gathered to face the landing. They retreated, missing a golden opportunity to confront the Crusaders at this vulnerable moment. As Amazon's Alexa, a descendant of Alexios or Alexios? Neither. So on the 11th of July, 1203, the Westerners very quickly take the Galata Tower, which I believe... Here we go. We have a map of Constantinople, guys. So I will be on the slide for a bit. I can't see you at the moment. But yes, as you can see, this is where the Galata Tower is. It controls the chain that goes across the Golden Horn, which protects the vulnerable part of the city from naval invasion. So yes, possession of the Golden Horn opened out the soft underbelly of Constantinople, and after a swift rout of the moribund Byzantine fleet, the Phoenician ships moored just off the city walls to make clear the threat that Constantinople now faced. So basically, they very quickly deal with the dilapidated Byzantine fleet, which had 20 ships by this point. They get defeated, pushed off, and so the harbour is completely vulnerable for Venetian ships to land on. G-Day pre-alpha version, yes. Beta male math. Should have spammed galleys, yeah, they should have. Unfortunately, the Byzantines were in no economic situation to build a massive fleet, because, guess what? The Byzantines had actually relied on the Venetian to be their naval powerhouse for centuries by this point. And so they didn't actually have that big a naval force themselves because they could rely on the Venetians. So when it comes to the Venetians being the one attacking them, they're in a little bit of trouble. So yes. Bop, 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 bop. Bop, 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 bop. Where am I into the notes? Okay. The Venetians made use of scaling ladders on their ships to launch their next assault to climb the walls. The French chose to fight on land and established a fortified camp on the northern edge of the city. Which, if you can see in this map. So the French were camping all along here. This is where they were building up their base inside the city. So now the Crusaders have their own sort of foothold in the city, and it's very difficult for the Byzantines to try and drive them out. Eventually, Alexios III does make a move. And basically, his strategy is to hamper the Greeks, hamper the Crusaders, and cut off their supply chain. Which sounds a little familiar to maybe modern wars. So the Crusaders actually start running low on food, and they have about 3 weeks' supplies. So in desperation, on the 17th of July, the Venetians and the Crusaders do a two-pronged attack. The ships bombard the walls with arrows and stones, but make very little headway. And the French Crusaders advance via foot into the city proper. So advancing into... Hopefully you guys can see this. So advancing from here, marching into here. This is where the palace is. This is where all the seat of power in Constantinople. Which is obviously where the military is fighting. Where the Byzantine military would have been stationed. So basically Alexios III sort of turtles up and then finally makes his move on the 17th of July. Well, no. He turtles up, harasses the Venetians and Crusaders supply line, and then draws them out into a proper battle in the city. So, what happens next? The Venetians don't make much headway in their siege across the walls, and so it's proving very ineffective. So Doge Enrico Dandolo, who by this point is 90 years old or something, he's like maybe at least 90 years old, he's blind as a bat, he demands for his boat to charge ahead and land in the city. And in doing so, as he anticipated, his men follow suit, desperate to avoid being shamed by a blind old man. So yes, we now have both the Venetians and the Crusaders landing in the city and are basically advancing through the city. And they get their bridgehead. It's a very intense thrust. It terrifies the defenders, and Emperor Alexios III counters through a contingent of formidable Varangian guards of Russian and Scandinavian mercenaries. But although they are able to halt the Venetians' momentum, the latter responded by starting a fire. So the Venetians... Vagarian... What did I say? Did I say Varangians? Oh no, that is... Yeah, Varangians. Sorry, I thought I misread because... Yeah, never mind. I got confused. So yes, the Venetians start a fire, which very quickly is fanned by westerly winds and engulfs 120 acres of the eastern side of the city. Which, as you can probably tell, is where the palace is. So basically, this fire spreads very quickly over this side of the city. And so the city by this point is engulfed in chaos. You hope no library's caught on fire. Yeah. Oh, one sec, guys. I just need to clear my throat. Okay. No, don't mute. No, I'm being gross. I'm just going blah, 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 sputtering into the microphone. Well, not into the microphone, but away from the microphone. Anyway, so there's chaos everywhere at this point. There's chaos everywhere. Black smoke billowing over the city. Alexios takes the initiative, leads out his army to confront the Crusaders on the northeast edge of the city. By this point, the Byzantine army actually outnumbers the Crusaders. The force that is involved in this assault includes 500 knights, 500 other mounted men, 2,000 foot soldiers. In this sort of push towards the palace in the east. The Crusaders, even the cooks and stable lads, donned pots and horse blankets for protection. The Crusaders advance in tight formation. Alexios, instead of choosing this moment to exploit his numerical superiority, withdraws back into the city. Back further into the city. Basically, this is a massive blunder because, for whatever reason, he decides not to attack. And this will be his undoing. Basically, as Phillips writes, the popular stereotype of effeminate and unwarlike Greeks has been entirely fulfilled. The Crusaders were certain that it was their martial vigour that had won the day. Hugh of St. Paul proudly reports, when they saw that we were brave and steadfast, and that we moved forwards in formation, that we could not be overrun or broken, they rightfully became terrified and confused. Retreating before us, they dared not fight by day. Which I believe I make mention to in the previous slide. Yep. And we also hear from old mate Nicetas Carnitas saying, Alexios returned in utter disgrace, having only made an enemy more haughty and insolent. By this point, the Crusaders were running out of food quite quickly, and had they pushed the advantage, the Crusaders would likely have had to sue for peace because of their lack of food. Carnitas also continues saying, it was as though he had laboured hard to make a miserable corpse of the city, to bring her to utter ruin in defiance of her destiny, and he hastened her along her destruction. And so on the night of July the 17th, 1203, Emperor Alexios flees the city. On the morning of the 18th of July, both Isaac and Alexios are proclaimed emperors of Emperor of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire. There we go. And then the Crusaders hydrated by drinking the entire tea. Not quite. Not quite. But I believe that has been another hour, guys. I believe. We only went through 5 slides this time. As you can tell, it gets quite meaty at this point once we get into the Crusade proper and the attacks on Constantinople. So we're going to do another quick break. I'm going to quickly go grab some water. If you need to stretch. If you need to get up and go. If you need to head off, that's okay. I hope you guys have a nice time, but I will be back in 5 minutes. Oh my gosh, so hot today. It is so hot right now. Oh gosh. How are you guys doing? Hopefully it's going well. It's very hot here. Jesus. This room is very toasty. I have the fans on and yeah, it's a little toasty. Yes, hi. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. I'll restart in a couple of secs. I forgot to take my phone with me to the toilet so I couldn't get some Arknights in. I can send my guys out for an Arknights mission now. But yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying this. Which crusade was Saladin a part of? That was the third crusade. Kayla. Is that Kayla? Am I saying that right? Kayla. Playing games during class, for shame. As long as you're enjoying it. I am enjoying it. I'm just very nervous because I'm used to, like, when I have to do lectures, the very few times that I've had to do lectures, it's in front of at most like 50 people. And I know most of those guys are maybe not paying attention and they're just like listening to my voice. And then this time it's like, oh god, that's a lot of people. I'm trying not to look at the number. But it's scary. And I'm very nervous. I'm normally a bit more prepared than this. Need to show your students the cute anime girl. Just hag voice enjoyers, I guess. I guess. Me and my weird voice. Why would the students not pay attention? Because they have to see me in person. Probably. Okay, we'll get back into it now. I've hydrated. I won't dehydrate. I have lots of water. Okay. Back into the presentation, guys. So, Isaac and Alexios become co-emperors. Senior officials in the city actually try and they get Isaac back on the throne to try and stop the Crusaders from destroying the city. Because, yeah, that fire had really done a number on a lot of the city. I believe at some point, I might be thinking of the sack of Constantinople, but I believe 20,000 people were made homeless, which is a lot of people. That's a lot of people. You've made weird observation that when Cleo drinks, the model kind of makes an ahega. Wait, what? Oh, it kind of does. Now I'm self-conscious about that. Oh no. Why did you have to point that out? God damn it. Okay. So. Where were we? Okay, yes. So Isaac is reinstated. The officials of the city hoped that that would end the siege, which it does. The Crusaders cheer in victory because God has granted them an unlikely victory. Villehardouin and other members of the Crusader forces lead an embassy into the city, where Isaac was horrified to discover the details of his son's deal with the Crusaders. And so you have to remember that this is Geoffrey of Villehardouin's recounting of the events. And, oh, I'm a little bit on screen. Hang on, let me move myself a little bit. There we go, now you can see everything. So Geoffrey has been accused a lot of perhaps whitewashing or maybe toning down some of the details, or maybe censoring some of the stuff that people said, because maybe it's not a good look for Isaac to be like, what the fuck did you do, you fucking idiot? What was Isaac the second doing the whole time? Isaac was in prison. He was in prison. He had been blinded and imprisoned. And so had Alexios. He had been in prison, but he escapes. Had he killed Alexios, the Prince Alexios, I mean, like, all of this would have been avoided. But alas, he couldn't. So yes, the statement that Geoffrey records is Isaac saying, "In truth, this agreement is a most burdensome one, and I do not see quite how it can be fulfilled. However, you have done both my son and myself such a service that if you have been granted the whole empire, you would have well deserved it." And so yeah, it turns out a little bit of foreshadowing there on the part of Isaac. Because it turns out the Empire doesn't last very long after this. So the Crusaders make camp on the Golden Horn by the Galatid district, which is, if you don't remember, it's over here. So the Crusaders are camped over here. This is where they wait for their repayment in fulfilling their side of the deal with Alexios, who is now Emperor Alexios IV. What an odd emote, Flannel Man. So first, things are looking good. The Crusaders receive shipments of food, and they start receiving payments from Alexios IV. Some of the members of the Crusader party actually travel into Constantinople, and basically everything's very happy. The people of Constantinople aren't very supportive of them. They're not very fond of them. But they have to tolerate their presence, and they basically sort of just act like tourists. They're on holiday. They see the sights and sounds of Constantinople, examine the various relics that the city has. And so there is the thought that perhaps the Crusaders may have realized at this point just how much or how little the Greeks had in terms of wealth to pay them. Of course, it turns out they did not have that much. And also, the Crusaders at this point start sending letters back to Europe to defend their decision to attack Constantinople. So as a letter from Hugh of St. Paul writes, he says, "The Eastern Church, whose head is Constantinople, along with the emperor and the entire empire, reunited with its head, the Roman pontiff, acknowledges itself to be the daughter of the Roman Church." They're basically trying to justify their own actions because, look, we've reunified the church, we've ended the schism. They hadn't. Because guess what? There was no actual plans for Alexios to formally end the schism, and there was no actual submission on behalf of the Orthodox Church was made. Yeah. Alexios has to pay up. but he cannot. He might have promised a little too much. So for Alexios IV to provide the vast sums of money that he needed to promise the Crusaders, he had to begin melting down precious icons and relics, a practice bitterly resented by his own people. Conitos wrote, "It was a sight to behold, the holy icons of Christ consigned to the flames after being hacked to pieces with axes and cast down. Their adornments carelessly and sparingly removed by force, and their revered and all-hallowed vessels seized from the churches with utter indifference and melted down and given over to the enemy troops as common silver and gold." So yeah, Alexios is just trying to salvage as much wealth as possible because they just do not have it. Or he is unwilling to give it, as we might see a little bit later. Yes, so there was a desiccation of holy relics on behalf of the Byzantines to try and pay off the Crusaders the money that they owe. 200,000 silver marks. Huge iconoclast W, yes, Vic. Iconoclasts, very happy with this decision. So yes, by this point it was late summer of 1203, and once again it is too late to sail to Egypt. And so the Crusader force has to winter in Constantinople, because it is too dangerous for them to sail across the Mediterranean and attack Egypt. They also believe that they're going to get massive amounts of reinforcements from Alexios. So instead they help Alexios IV consolidate his authority in and around the city to prepare for their departure in the spring of 1204. Of which the young emperor acknowledges the fact that he is not a very popular figure in the city. And so he says, supposedly to Geoffrey, in front of Geoffrey of Villehardouin, he says, "You should know then that the Greek hate me on account of you. If you leave, I will lose this land and they will put me to death." So obviously, if the Crusaders want to get their money, if they want to get their manpower, if they want to get all the stuff that they were promised by Alexios and more, they have to stick around. So they help Alexios hold the city. And over time, the relationships between the Greeks and the Crusaders deteriorate. A small mosque in the city is attacked, and is but one of the conflicts that emerge within the city between the inhabitants of Constantinople and the Crusaders. Here we go. The Crusaders accidentally start a blaze that burns more than 400 acres of the city into a smouldering wasteland. The Greeks are furious, and all Westerners living in Constantinople are forced to flee to the Crusaders' camp over the Golden Horn as a result. Also, it's important to note the Crusaders actually rely on Alexios for their food. So not only is Alexios paying them, he is also feeding them. By mid-November, the payments of money and food begin to stop. And of course, the Crusaders, by this point, if they don't have any food, they can't sail to Egypt. So the relationship between Alexios IV and the inhabitants of the city and the Crusaders are at just rock bottom. The Crusaders would remind Alexios of his moral and financial duties, but now added a threat. According to Geoffrey, they stated... Oh, one sec, my voice is dying. they threatened, you should know that from this time forward, they will not regard you as their lord or friend. Instead, they will recover what is owed to them by whatever means necessary. They have never acted deceitfully, and it would be against the custom of their country to do so. So yes, the relationship between Alexios and the Crusaders is completely ruined by this point. Supposedly, Alexios threatens to have the envoys who sent that message killed. They're very lucky to escape with their lives. But yes, Alexios is completely cornered. He could not deny the oath that he had made to the Crusaders, but he could not afford to favor the Westerners because he had no money and he had no support to give them. He had no army. Well, he did have an army, but it was pretty run down by the time that the siege had finished, and 1203, late 1203, early 1204. So, as you can tell, relationship between Crusaders and Alexios is absolutely snookered. So, Enrico Dandolo tries to find a peaceful solution. And in doing so, he angers Alexios IV, who then goes out and he lashes out and insults the Doge. Now, this statement is from Robert of Clary, so Robert was not there. Robert was not important enough to be considered an envoy or a diplomat or a member of any sort of diplomatic mission to seek sort of not seek oh god, I'm my brain basically Robert wouldn't have been there. That's what I'm trying to say. Robert wouldn't have been there. Yeah, he wouldn't have treated with Alexios. He's just a regular knight, so we have to take his statement that he makes with a grain of salt. But he has Enrico Dandolo saying, "Wretched boy, we dragged you out of the filth, and into the filth we will cast you again. And I defy you, and I give you warning that I will do you all the harm in my power from this moment forwards." Which is obviously a statement that a lot of people who want to paint Enrico Dandolo in a negative brush will latch onto. But again, it's very important to note that Robert would not have been there, and people like to exaggerate. Did Enrico Dandolo say this? He may have. But yes, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Anyway. From this moment on, the Crusaders and the Byzantine Empire are now at war. So on the 1st of July, 1204, the Byzantines make their first move, and they send a fleet of 17 fireships to try and completely obliterate the Venetian fleet. This attack is foiled because of, according to Geoffrey, because of the expert maneuver of immense skill in which the Venetians threw grappling irons onto the burning ships and dragged them out into the channel. So yeah, the first attack of Alexios IV, completely ineffective. But you also have to remember that the Crusaders are running out of food. They have no food of their own. They were completely reliant on Alexios to feed them. So this is when things start to get very, very desperate. Yes, wait, welcome Data Satan. Yes, I'm doing a lecture on the Fourth Crusade. So you're now facing a situation where the Crusaders are absolutely desperate. They have no money. They have been lied and betrayed to by the Alexios IV. They're running out of food, and they're starting to get desperate. Also, on the Byzantine side, the Byzantines are also getting desperate because the first attack completely fails. Anti-Western sentiment in the city is at an all-time high, and Alexios IV is seen as the cause of all these issues. So the Byzantine nobles... Wait, no. Okay, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. A Byzantine noble known as Motsopflos. I'm probably butchering that. I'm sorry. His nickname literally means mono eyebrow. If we take a look at his picture, I think it's in the next in one of the few. Oh no, it's further up. Okay, so if we go back to here, he's this guy in the corner. This one. I'll just copy paste it. Here we are. It's this guy. Okay. There we go. As you can see, he's got a monobrow. His nickname is literally, he's got a monobrow. I'm guessing this is why they chose to sack Constantinople instead of actually crusading. Yes. Hi, Bolton Brains, welcome. So yes. He leads the attacks against the Westerners and gets very popular because of his anti-Western sentiment and being the leading military figure. Alexios obviously, by this point, sees that his days are numbered. And the noble court of the Byzantine Empire actually elect another man to take the throne, because they needed to get rid of Alexios IV because he was responsible for all of their problems. So his name is Nicholas Canavos, and he's elected on the 27th of January. And he's actually very unwilling to become the emperor, and doesn't want the position because, as it turns out, being the emperor gets you killed. So he hides in a church because he just doesn't want the job. Refuses the position and goes into hiding. And so Alexios, by this point, pleads for the Crusaders to help. And that plea comes a little too late, because by this point, Mr. Monobrow seizes power in a coup and becomes emperor, imprisoning Alexios IV. So within hours of imprisoning Alexios IV, he's crowned Emperor Alexios V. And by this point, you have the Byzantine Empire has 4 different people crowned emperor. So you have Isaac II, who's still alive by this point. He's blind, but he's still the emperor. You have Alexios IV, who is technically also the emperor, but imprisoned. You have Nicholas Canavos, who has been elected emperor but doesn't want the job. And then you have Alexios V, who doesn't, takes the opportunity to seize power and believes he can defend the city against the Westerners. So he actually does. He refortifies the city. he refortifies the defenses of Constantinople and very quickly gets rid of Canavos and Isaac. So Isaac, we don't actually know if Isaac was killed by Alexios V or if he dies from natural causes. But Canavos is also executed as well. Fifth time the charm. Not quite. So he refortifies the defenses of Constantinople, and some Venetians are actually captured in the city and hooked off the wall of the city and then set ablaze to show what would happen to any Westerners that attack. So these 3 Venetians suffer a pretty gruesome fate. What decides who's actually in charge? Basically the court, the noble court of the empire. They basically like, fuck this guy, replace him. And then because Nicholas refuses to take power, Alexios V takes the opportunity and takes power, and then is crowned emperor. So Canavos is dead, Isaac dies, and Alexios IV is in prison. By this point, where are my notes? Ah, I've lost my position. Okay. On the 8th of February, 1204, Alexios IV is strangled. This is the plot for Goncharov, I guess. I mean, a lot of media takes influence from historical events. If it sounds familiar, it's probably because it's influenced by the Fourth Crusade. So, as you can see, his death, the death of Alexios IV, now gives the Crusaders justification to remove his killer. Their reason for journeying to Constantinople in the first place is lost with the death of Alexios. The Crusaders are very, very quickly running out of food and supplies, and their options are either to return home in shame or declare war. So what do they do? Well, they have to consult the clergy as well, because do we have a justification to once again attack Christians? And it turns out that the clergy members in the crusading forces agree with them and argue that the Orthodox Church was in open schism, saying, "We tell you that this battle is right and just. If you have the right intention of conquering this land and placing it in obedience to Rome, all those of you who die here having made your confession will receive the same indulgence the Pope granted you." Which, according to Geoffrey of Villehardois, says this verdict was a great comfort to the barons and pilgrims. So they've been given justification by not only the actions of Alexios V, but also by their own clergymen. The important thing to note is that Pope Innocent III had forbidden an assault on the city on the basis of schism. So you now have the clergy, the members of the clergy in the crusading forces are saying that, yeah, you can attack the city because of the schism. And the Pope himself is saying, you do not have the authority to attack on the basis of a schism. So what do the Crusaders do? They listen to the clergymen, they don't listen to the Pope, and they attack. So here we are. We're finally on to the sack of Constantinople, guys. Oof. With no resources, yes. They are very quickly running out of the city. Yes, Innocent III, very famous defender of not attacking Christians. I can't wink, but imagine... Oh, wait, no, I can wink. There you go. Yeah, Innocent III, he hated attacking Christians. Okay. So yeah. Realizing that they weren't going to get all of the things that Alexios IV had promised them because he was dead, they decide to take it by force. So prior to the siege, the Crusaders actually planned the division of their conquest. So they do have plans in advance for what they're going to do if they're victorious. So what they have set up is this March Pact. All loot and booty from the assault will be centrally pooled, with payment of the remaining debts to the Venetians taking priority. So Venetians get first call on the money that will come from this assault and looting of the city. Because they are still owed 34,000 silver marks, and most likely also the 200,000 silver marks that Alexios had originally planned to, or promised rather, to pay them. Okay. And so they set up a committee of 6 Frenchmen and 6 Venetians who would decide the Latin emperor and the patriarch of the new Constantinople, because they were already planning for the dissolution of the Byzantine Empire by this point, because they'd been jerked around by Alexios IV. All of their plans completely ruined by Alexios V. They had no money, they had no food, they wanted what was promised to them, and they would take it by force. So they agreed that the campaign to the Holy Land should be put on hold until 1205, as any sort of new states that they create from this assault will need to have their power consolidated once they are formed. Okay, and so on in the 9th of April 1204, the fleet of the Venetians make their move. And so they construct basically hang on, let me reread this because my notes are... I wrote this obviously when I wasn't paying attention that much. Okay. The fleet, arranged in the by now familiar divisions, moved across the Golden Horn. In some places, a narrow strip of land lay between the fortifications and the water, and here the French put scaling ladders to the walls while siege engines began to bombard the city. In turn, the defenders fired back with their own missiles and pouring down boiling oil. Alexios V's bold leadership, coupled with the contrary winds that kept the Venetian ships away from the walls, forced the Crusaders to retreat. Morale in the Crusader camp was unsurprisingly low. As you can probably tell, their first attack fails, and they are running out of food. They are going to starve to death if they don't do something drastic. To encourage their troops to reinstall morale, the clergy make some very bold statements to encourage their troops. They claim that the day's events were simply a divine test of the Crusaders' resolve, ratcheting up the rhetoric, or rhetoric rather. I always say that wrong, because rhetorical and rhetoric, and preached powerful sermons that sought to de-Christianize the Greeks, arguing that I am quoting here, Twitch, this is not my word, that they were worse than the Jews and their disobedience to the papacy merited punishment. The clergy also ordered everyone to take communion and for the camp prostitutes to be expelled, customary purifications before Crusader battles in the East. The main body of the crusading army remained ignorant that it was in contravention of papal wishes. Okay, next slide. Boop. So the second assault begins on the 13th of July, 1204. Wait, 13th of April, not July? Numpty. I'm an idiot. April, guys. So yes. The second assault begins. In the words of Geoffrey, cries from the battle were so great that it seemed that the whole world was quaking. Basically, the start of the assault is not looking very good for the Crusaders. Venetians managed to jump on from fortified bridges onto the walls, only to be butchered by the defenders. 2 knights managed to get a foothold, and very quickly the Crusader banners flutter on the battlements of Constantinople, but very little progress is made. So they do make a bit of a foothold in the walls of the city. And then our next bit of information about how the Crusaders actually managed to get into the city comes from Robert of Clary. So again, Robert may be not the most trustworthy source, but as we will say, basically a small group of knights were able to break into the makeshift defenses on the shoreline and penetrate through the makeshift barriers. Apparently, Robert's own brother, a cleric named Olooms, I don't think that's how you pronounce that name, he ignored his brother's pleas and insists that he should go first. He squeezes through a hole about the size of a fireplace and emerged to sustain a rain of blows from the defenders. To the defenders' horrors, however, he stands up and starts fighting them after being stabbed like a lot. Basically, he just gets absolutely fucked up, and then he gets up anyway and starts attacking, a bit like a berserker for Stamford Bridge, basically. Too angry to die. Absolute Chad. So the Greeks flee, and very quickly this small Crusader group is able to break through, and what they do is they locate a gate which then allows the armoured forces and mounted knights to pour into Constantinople. Overnight, by nightfall, most of the districts of the city close to the Golden Horn are completely overrun by the Crusaders. Alexios V, sensing that defeat was imminent, flees the city, and the city is completely surrendered to the Crusaders. So yes, by this point, the Crusaders, the Venetians, they are victorious. The city of Constantinople is theirs. Also, I believe I'm a little bit on the front. Okay, it was just the word inspired. My hair is too poofy. It covers the words. So yes. Boniface of Montferrat arrives in the palace, where he found such a store of precious things that is impossible to describe. And so the previous plans to organize the shave it. No, not new hair soon. No, I'm just talking because my hair's so poofy, it can cover some of the slides. Just squib. Yeah, okay, I'll go over here like this. Okay. Let me hydrate very quickly. So the previous plans to show restraint and pull all of the loot from Constantinople and be orderly goes completely out the window. Angered by months of ill treatment by the Byzantines, bolstered by the belief in divine favor, and inspired by greed, the foot soldiers and common soldiers of the Crusade go absolutely wild. They start looting and pillaging and murdering without distinction. So whilst the palace is taken over in relative order, the rest of the city is not so lucky. The Crusaders despoiled churches and houses, killed and savaged without distinction. They ransacked the Cathedral of Hagia Sophia, the spiritual heart of Constantinople. Drunken Westerners danced beneath the magnificent mosaic ceiling. A prostitute flaunted herself on the altar of the Hagia Sophia and straddled the patriarch's chair. Meanwhile, pack animals, slipping on their own excrement, stole away the spoils of war. If there were all of these treasures in the palace, why didn't they just use that to pay the Crusaders? We don't know. There's no reason as to why Alexios refused to pay. Probably because it would bankrupt his empire, and then he would get just overthrown by his countrymen. He probably couldn't afford to hand over all of their relics. I mean, he was already melting down some of the relics already, so like he was already upsetting his common folk and the nobility of Constantinople because it was just an absolute shit show. So even the clergymen join in on this surge of rapacity. I believe I have that on the next slide. Let me just double check. Yes. Okay. So Abbot Martin of Paris says to a... he reached the treasury of the imperial foundation of the Church of the Christ Pantocrator. He seizes the guardian, an ancient orthodox man, and roared, "Come, faceless old man, show me the more powerful of the relics you guard. Otherwise, understand that you'll be punished immediately with death." And of course, the petrified old monk surrenders the objects that he had defended for decades and decades. And so these venerated relics are stolen by the abbot, his robes misshapen by the booty which he was concealing. Setting aside explanations of divine favor, it is hard for us, as it was for some of their contemporaries, to see anything meritorious in these actions at all. Vast numbers of relics make their way back to the churches of Western Europe, and while the four horses and objects in the treasury of St. Mark's in Venice are the most famous of these, many other crusaders gave precious objects to their local churches when they returned home. So we have, for example, the perspective from Nicholas Mesarites, contemporary Byzantine author, who wrote of Westerners tearing children from mothers and mothers from children, treating the Virgin with wanton shame in holy chapels, viewing with fear neither the wrath of God nor the vengeance of man. And so he rages at the Crusaders being fraudsters, sinners against Christ, liars. He calls them all sorts of different names, guys. He's not very happy with what's happening to his fellow people in Constantinople. He drew a sharp contrast with Saladin's generous treatment of the defenders of Jerusalem in 1187 with the savagery of the Westerners against the fellow Christians in Constantinople. The message from him was clear. Even Muslims were superior to these barbaric crusaders. Oh, my mouth is so dry from all this talking. So yes, the city is being completely pillaged. It's being absolutely wrecked. And so we get to the aftermath. Cleo, I'm a fish, yeah. Well, everyone needs water. So we get to the aftermath of the sack of Constantinople. On the 9th of May, Count Baldwin of Flanders is elected the first Latin Emperor of Constantinople. As you can see that in, let me get the slide up, that's this purple-looking colour here, purpley pink. So the border here, all the way over to Constantinople, across the border into Nicomedia, and across here like this. So that's all the land that the Latin Empire takes. That's what Baldwin takes. Venice take Crete, Corfu, Negroponte, the Ionian Islands, and Cephalonica. So that's over here, Corfu, Cephalonia, Negroponte, Crete, and the Duchy of the Archipelago. Boniface of Montferrat takes the Kingdom of Thessalonica, so the border is here, and it goes all the way down to here into the Duchy of Athens. There's also the Principality of Achaia created, which I believe goes to someone else. I can't remember who gets it. I'm blanking on it now. And then we also have the fragmentation of the Byzantine Empire. So we have the Epirus is one of the rump states. I said it again. I said that last night. Rump state. So the rump states of the Byzantine Empire. So we've got Epirus, we've got Nicaea, or Nicaea, and then we have Trebizond over here. Rump steak. I'm hungry a little bit. The Fourth Crusade was a bit of a horrific fuck up. Yeah. And it also, unfortunately, solidified the schism between the East and West Church. So the Pope's goal of unifying the Church is unfortunately unfulfilled, and in fact, unsurprisingly, the Eastern Church is quite horrified by the events of the Fourth Crusade, and vows to never rejoin with the Christian or the Catholic Church. Okay. Continued, the aftermath. So what happens to our cast of characters, guys? What happens? So Doge Enrico Dandolo, he actually attempts to get out of his crusading vow, because by this point I believe he's 94 years old or 95 years old, and he asks the Pope to allow him to go on pilgrimage to go to Jerusalem before he dies. And the Pope refuses because obviously the Pope is not the biggest fan of Enrico Dandolo. So yes, Enrico Dandolo dies in 1205 and is buried in the Hagia Sophia. Emperor Baldwin, newly crowned emperor of the Latin Empire of Constantinople, is captured by the Bulgarians in 1205. And so he's just gone. Nobody knows what happens to him. I mean, we do actually know what happens to him. He, there we go. Let me find out for you right now on stream. Yes, he dies later in the year in Bulgaria because he's been captured by the Bulgarians. Funny to remember that the Bulgarians were just there. Yeah, I mean, while all that happened. Yeah, basically, everyone just watched the Crusaders do this and then just capitalized on the fact that the Byzantines were just gone. Yep. So, he dies 1205. Louis of Bois dies in battle against the Bulgarians in 1205. Geoffrey of Villehardouin stays in Greece. I believe his nephew gets a high-ranking position in Achaia. He dies in 1213. Boniface of Montferrat, likewise, he becomes the king of Thessalonica. He dies in 1207 in battle to the Bulgarians. And then Innocent III is our lone survivor. Ikea, not IKEA, Ikea. And he constantly sort of flip-flops about whether the Fourth Crusade was a good thing or not. So obviously he tried to prevent the expedition attacking Christian lands, but also he also notes that his phrasing of these directives proved easy to circumvent or ignore. His initial reaction to the news was actually very positive, and was hoping that that this would be the end of the schism and that the Orthodox Church would rejoin with the Catholic Church. In November 1204, he wrote that God had transformed the Byzantine Empire from the proud to the humble, from the disobedient to the obedient, from the schismatic to Catholic. He was prepared to award full crusading privileges for the defense of the Latin Empire, and into 1205 continued to speak of the miracle that has come to pass in these days. By the middle of 1205, however, his tone had darkened. First, the legate of the Crusade had released the men from their vows to go to the Levant. A practical move based on the vulnerability of the Latin Empire, but one that ended any prospect of the Crusade going to the Holy Land. So basically, the Fourth Crusade sort of just fizzles, because the papal legate basically allows all of the Crusaders to end their commitment to the Crusade. So obviously, Innocent isn't happy about that. His pride and joy that it had already gone completely wrong. His master plan to reclaim the Holy Land, to reclaim Jerusalem, just fizzles into nothingness. And also, more and more visitors travel back to Rome and begin to describe the sack in detail. So he hears firsthand about the sordid, grasping behavior of the Crusades, and realized that the Orthodox Church would never acknowledge the papal primacy if it saw the Latins as nothing except an example of affliction and the works of hell, so that now it rightly detests them more than dogs. Quite strong words. He railed at Boniface of Montferrat, saying, "You turned away from the purity of your vow when you took up arms not against Saracens but Christians, preferring earthly wealth to celestial treasures." And obviously, Innocent is not very happy. Did Innocent III have Twitch-branded flip-flops? Maybe he did. We sense Innocent's confusion that God had allowed this to happen. Who can know the mind of the Lord? Was his troubled and unsettled conclusion about the Fourth Crusade. And so, yeah, there we have it. The end of the Fourth Crusade ends in a fizzle. The dissolution of the Byzantine Empire and the establishment of a very short-lived Latin Empire in the East. So, where do we go from here? I will get to this in 1 second, as it has been another hour, and we will take a 5-minute break. Good night, Professor Clear in chat. Thank you for stopping by, Drayvik. But this will be the last section of the lecture. I will be going into the analysis of the sort of historical evidence and talking about why are the Venetians vilified so much. Because hopefully you guys will have seen that it's not necessarily just the Venetians at fault. It's a whole mess. And hopefully you guys will maybe understand that. Venetian apologia. No, I'm not going to absolve the Venetians of their sins, but they are not solely to blame like people like to make them out to be. Time to finally go to sleep after being awake for 24 hours. Oh my gosh, bolts and brains. Jeez, yes, please get some sleep. Okay, I'm just going to quickly refill the water. I don't need to go to the toilet, so I'm just going to grab the water and then we'll get back into it. It won't be a 5-minute break.
Ultrafeist Zero cheered X100. Thanks for the information, Teach. I'd if we needed to take notes from this or not, but it's been hella interesting to listen to your educational streams, Teach.
Thank you very much, Ultrafist. Thank you very much for the bits. Okay, I will be not 5 minutes, I'll be a couple minutes, and then we'll get back into it, because we're basically at the end. This is slide number, oh, that's VTube Studio. We are at slide number 32 of 40, technically. I did add one at the end. Okay, be right back. I'm just getting some water, guys. Okay, right. Let's get stuck into analysis. So, many people tend to blame the Venetians as the cause of the Fourth Crusade going so horribly wrong and resulting in the destruction of the Byzantine Empire. There's a lot of examples of people doing that. If you go into friends of the stream, Paradox Games, games such as EU4, games such as Crusader Kings, you have little nods to the events of the Fourth Crusade, and, well, I mean, in Crusader Kings, I believe you can see the entire thing. You have the Venetians being painted as opportunistic, treacherous, evil, secretive, liars, unchristian, basically just all sorts of vilification against the Venetians. Now, is that true? If you were to blame someone, it would be Alexios IV. Yes. That is generally what the consensus is. It is a very young prince who offered the Crusaders way too much stuff and then couldn't fulfill his promises. So yes, there are two main reasons as to why we have the Venetians being vilified so much. Unfortunately, we have no Venetian perspective of the Fourth Crusade recorded. It would be fantastic if we could understand the motivations of Enrico Dandolo, for example. But unfortunately, we have no sort of records of his thoughts, his writing, his decision-making. We don't have any of that. What about Alexios III overthrowing Isaac? You could also blame that, but you run the risk of going too far back in history and being like, oh, the reason the Fourth Crusade happened, you can span it all the way back to the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century. So we try not to go too far back, because you do need to sort of have these events. Like, you can't really look at history as isolated events. Everything is connected. But you also can't just say, oh, it's this fault because something X happened 50 years earlier, or whatever. And yes, so the other point is we have historians using an over-reliance of Nikitas Konaitos' perspective and writings. Although it is a fantastic source, he does paint a very specific picture, as one would expect, of a man witnessing his home city be absolutely destroyed by the Byzantines and by the Venetians and the Crusaders. So, moving in. Yes, first of all, we have to talk about the trustworthiness of sources, which is a eternal issue in history. Can we rely on our sources? Geoffrey of Villeharrois, despite being our most important source from a Crusader perspective, is often considered to have whitewashed the events. He does tend to talk about certain events not in a way as harsh as others. Unfortunately, we have to live with that. We can't do anything about this. What we can do is try and corroborate our sources and try and paint what we think the best picture that we can. And we do have some sources from the Crusaders talking about the atrocities that they committed. We have Martin of Paris, and we also have, I believe, Hugh of St. Paul also talks about some of the not so fantastic actions of the Crusaders. But yes, talking about the trustworthiness of historical sources is a whole different thing. I have one source here open. It is Marcus Bull. Is it? Wait. Oh, let me zoom in. Okay. Yeah, so Marcus Bull, Eyewitnesses and Crusader Narrative, Perception and Narrative in Accounts of the Second, Third, and Fourth Crusades. This is an 81-page chapter of this book, and it is just about Geoffrey of Villeharrois and Robert of Clary's narratives of the Fourth Crusade. So as you can probably tell, discussing the trustworthiness of history and our ancient sources is a constant issue. How's it going? I think it's going okay, Mako. I think it's going okay. I'm very nervous, but we're almost at the end. So, whilst our Crusader sources are held with a grain of salt, is Nicetas treated the same way? Generally, no. I haven't included, I will include actually I think a few of the quotes a little bit later in the PowerPoint. Yes, okay, the next slide will talk about some of Nicetas's kind words he has for the Venetians and Enrico Dandolo. Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, well, I guess we'll just skip to the next page. Hopefully this is legible, guys. It looks like it's legible on my screen. But yes, I will read it out to you. So here is what Nicetas says about a man that he never met. The Doge of Venice, Enrico Dandolo, was not the least of horrors, a man maimed in sight and along in years, a creature most treacherous and extremely jealous of the Romans, a sly cheat who called himself wiser than the wise and madly thirsting for glory as no other. He preferred death to allowing the Romans to escape the penalty for their insulting treatment of his nation. And all the while he pondered on how many evils the Venetians associated with the rule of the Angelos brothers, Isaac and Alexios, and of the Andronicus before them, and prior to them of Manuel, who held sway over the Roman Empire. Realizing, oh, why is that spelt wrong? Disaster. Realizing that should he work some treachery against the Romans with his fellow countrymen alone, he would bring disaster down upon his head. He schemed to include other accomplices, to share his secret designs with those whom he knew, nursed an implacable hatred against the Romans, and who looked with an envious and avaricious eye on their goods. So what does this passage tell you guys about Nicholas or Nicetas Conitus. What does this tell you about him? Not a big fan. No, he's not a big fan of the Doge. He is a mind reader, yes. This is one of the things where he is characterizing Enrico Dandolo in such a way that he has understanding of his inner machinations, when in fact we don't think he actually ever met Enrico Dandolo. Does that mean he is untrustworthy as a source? No. It does, however, mean we have to take some of his characterization into... we have to look at it carefully and decide, can we trust what he is saying as fact? As I have hopefully talked about a bit earlier, he is putting a lot of maliciousness on Enrico Dandolo as being at fault for the Fourth Crusade. He is also saying that all of the Western world, all of these Western Crusaders hated Constantinople, hated the Byzantines. We have no evidence of any sort of hatred between them. I believe he actually characterizes Alexios IV as a bit of a fool, but doesn't actually sort of blame him for the Fourth Crusade, when in actual fact a lot of the events of the Fourth Crusade are because Alexios promised the world and could not deliver. So, moving on to the next slide. Right. So, Enrico Dandolo, blamed for the long-term results of the Fourth Crusade, end of the Byzantine Empire and rise of the Ottomans. Can you blame Enrico Dandolo for the rise of the Ottomans? It's hard to say, and if you are to blame someone, which is not the role of the historian, you have to say a lot of different people are at fault. Did the Doge have a personal vendetta against the Byzantines? There are quite a few theories about where Enrico's supposed hatred of the Byzantine Empire comes from. The first one is that, as mentioned by Nicetas Conitus in our previous slide, it is believed that the Doge knew that Alexios IV would not be able to fulfill his financial obligation. And so you have historians such as Nicol writing stuff such as, the Greeks at the time were right in suspecting that it was Enrico Dandolo who led the Crusaders to Constantinople, which it wasn't. It was Alexios the Fourth. And then arranged things in such a way that they had a moral pretext for conquering it. Dandolo hid his purpose under a cloak of piety, but Constantinople was in his mind from the outset. As his eyesight faded, so too his wits sharpened, and his hatred for the Greeks became obsessive. So again, we have historians who are somehow able to read the minds and attribute malice to Enrico Dandolo, which, again, because we have no source, Nicol is somehow able to infer that Dandolo was able to predict the future, that Alexios would show up, who would guide them to Constantinople, who would then not be able to pay their debts, who would then die, and then also give them the justification that they could attack the city. Hi, Kyo. Welcome. That guy is not the guy who wrote Livin' La Vida Loca. I don't know who did that. And so another theory that as to attributing Enrico Dandolo's hatred to the Byzantines is, as I mentioned earlier, they believe he was potentially blinded in a street fight in Constantinople, or blinded by an emperor. So McNeill and Wolfe writes that the Doge may have lost his eyesight through their actions by Byzantines, and so the Doge hated Greeks. What do we know about Enrico Dandolo's physical appearance? Well, we know that according to Geoffrey of Villehardouin's description, that his eyesight had faded by natural degradation. If I can find the exact wording of it. Description of Enrico Dandolo. Unfortunately, I don't have the book in front of me, so I can't read out the what he writes. But he describes it as if his eyesight was basically it looked like he could see, but there was nothing behind his eyes. Which obviously you can infer that is a sign of natural ocular degeneration. Which, when you compare to the Byzantine practice of blinding, which involved gouging out the eyes, sometimes with a hot poker, and would left a visible damaging or scarring, that does not fit our description of Enrico Dandolo, or the artwork that exists of him. Not that those were drawn in contemporary times. And so the other possible alternative is that he lost it in a fight, but then the theory of him losing it in a fight means that Enrico Dandolo was getting in street fights in his 60s in Constantinople, which, I don't know about you guys, I don't know many 60-year-old men getting into street fights in Constantinople. So that theory is tenuous at best, but it does have at least some possible sort of reality, like basis in reality is what I was trying to say. Now, the final possible theory for Enrico Dandolo's possible reasons for wanting revenge against the Byzantines are the mass arrests of the nations in 1171 and the massacre of the Latins in 1182. If you do not know these events, in 1171, due to religious and cultural tensions within the city of Constantinople, the emperor of the Byzantines at the time, which was a Komnenos, I forget which one, he seized the property and arrested of all the Venetians living in Constantinople. That was a lot of people. It also went in complete violation of the Venice's agreements with the empire, as they had extensive trade dealings with the Byzantines. And so what happens is that when news of the mass arrests arrives back in Venice, there is a massive outcry. And so the Doge at the time, let me find out. I have it written down somewhere. Oh yeah, it was Manuel the First in 1171. So the Doge at the time was Doge, oh god, Vitale Michiel. He was Doge at the time. And so he was pressured by the public outcry in Venice to declare war on the Byzantines. So in 1171, Venice and the Byzantines actually were at war. And so the Venetians actually sailed with their full armada down through the Adriatic and were approaching Constantinople. And as they were moored at I forget which island it is, a plague broke out in the fleet, in the navy. And so it completely ruined their plans, and Venice and the Byzantine Empire sued for peace eventually. Sorry, I was just taking a drink. So that happened in 1171. And basically the Doge Vitale, completely humiliated, then gets murdered by the Venetians when he returns home. He just gets stabbed like his name was Julius Caesar, basically. So yeah, you could attribute some malice between the Venetians and the Byzantines from the mass arrests in 1171. Then, in 1182, you have the massacre of the Latins, in which the newly crowned emperor of the Byzantine Empire basically he rose to power on a wave of he entered the... Okay, so Andronicus I Komnenos entered the city on a wave of popular support. Almost immediately... he was known for... Wait. Oh, right. Okay, so following the death of Manuel I in 1180, his widow, the Latin princess Maria of Antioch, acted as regent for her son, Alexios II Komnenos. Her regency was notorious for showing favoritism to the Latin merchants and the big aristocratic owners, and was eventually overthrown in April 1182 by Andronicus Komnenos. The celebrations turned almost instantly into violence towards the hated Latins who entered the Latin quarters, and a mob began massacring the inhabitants. So yes, basically a lot of Italians, not only Venetians, a lot of Italians were killed that day. And there was never any sort of repayment. If I remember correctly, the Byzantine princess story was the one CK2 went with that triggers the Fourth Crusade. You could maybe argue that, yes. If you have to ask you after those quotes, is there any actual evidence of Enrico Dandolo having something against the Greeks? No. It's all conjecture. There is no evidence whatsoever that Enrico Dandolo held any sort of hostility. In fact, what we know about his career, as I mentioned earlier, he's a diplomat. He spent his life as a diplomat for Venice, including in Constantinople. I will get to that in a little bit. So yes, as you can see for this quote is actually from one of the earliest Venetian historians, Edwin Piers, who wrote in the 19th century. What is certain is that he, Dandolo, bore against the Byzantine Empire an inextinguishable hatred which made him willing to embrace any project directed against the capital city. And again, we have no evidence of any of this. And then the final theory is that the final theory of possible Venetian motivations to go to Constantinople is that the Venetians had a secret agreement with the Ayyubid Sultanate to not attack Egypt. Which again, emphasis on secret, because we have no evidence of it. There is no record of them having a allegiance or treaty or truce or anything. So yeah, these are all just theories, which unfortunately a lot of historians have since presented as fact. So what do we know about Enrico Dandolo? He had financial motivations for the Venetian involvement in the Fourth Crusade. They had constructed the fleet for the Crusaders. They weren't paid enough, and so they took the opportunity to join the Crusade in exchange for getting their debt settled. They took the city of Zara in Hungary. They took it back for the Venetians, but it was not Enrico's decision alone to decide to listen to Alexius' offer and travel to Constantinople. What do we know about Enrico himself personally? Because we've seen a lot of sources attribute malice to his secret machinations that he hated all the Greeks. What we do know about Enrico Dandolo is that he spent most of his life working as a diplomat for the Republic of Venice, including missions to Constantinople. People have used this as possible motivation or possible allusions to the fact that because he was a diplomat to the Republic, a diplomat to Constantinople, he would have known just how poor off the Byzantine Empire was. Again, it's somewhat of a stretch, but okay, you can maybe argue that. And also, we do have some actual historical evidence about the relationship of the Venetians and the Byzantines being stabilized after the chaos of the 12th century. So obviously, after the declaration of war in 1171, and also the massacre of the Latins in 1182, we do actually have historical evidence that the Venetians re-entered a military agreement with the Byzantines in return for the reinstatement of their economic privileges in Constantinople and across the empire. And so most of Enrico's career as Doge would have been spent repairing relations with Constantinople, repairing relations with the emperor, which they were able to do. So trying to install a puppet emperor with friendly ties to the Venetians is a massive gamble of all of his hard work, let alone pretending to install a puppet emperor and then also hoping he gets killed so you have the pretext to actually take the city for yourself, which, guess what, the Venetians didn't actually do. I believe Baldwin offers Constantinople to Enrico Dandolo, who promptly refuses, because they did not want a throne, because they're a republic. Controlling a throne of Constantinople is not the best look for a republic, if you might say. And also, yes, the Republic of Venice benefits from trade agreements from whoever controls Constantinople, as evident with the Byzantines, as evident with the Latin Empire, as evident with the Byzantines again, as evident with the Ottomans. All throughout Venetians' history, they benefited from someone else controlling the city and having trade agreements with them, not directly owning the land themselves. That is not to say the Venetians did not benefit with territory changes following the Fourth Crusade. They absolutely did, but not in Constantinople itself. So, who can we blame, guys? Who can we blame? Because obviously, the Fourth Crusade, a bit of a disaster. But it is not the job of the historian to moralize historical events. We just have to record what happens using to the best of our ability, understand what happened in the past. So, reasons for the chaos. We have Pope Innocent III failing to get the support of any sort of monarch, and then failing to control his own crusaders. You have the Crusaders for failing to recruit enough men for their cause, causing them to, resulting in them getting into massive debt with the Venetians. The Venetians for utilizing the Crusaders' debt for personal gain. And then most importantly, the person who I personally would put most of the blame on, Alexios IV, for being unable to fulfill his grandiose promises and resulting in the sack of Constantinople. Obviously, you can't blame one person. It's a combination of all sorts of different elements in history. Why can't you both make an accurate record and make a moral judgment of the events? So it's not the role of the historian to moralize history. It is not our job to judge the people in history for their actions. It's our job to talk about it and try and understand it to the best of our ability. Because we don't have a complete picture. If we did, we would somehow have a time machine because we got to see it firsthand. Yes, and moralizing history is for philosophers. It is not my job. That's the one thing you don't blame Innocent for. So yeah, we have multiple people at fault. You can't just blame the Venetians. And hopefully that is what I've been trying to argue for this case. Because the Venetians do get a little bit of a bad rap for the Fourth Crusade. Everyone is responsible for the... Yes, Rex, I think I would agree with you. The Pope, Crusaders, and Venetians are responsible for the circumstances. Alexios the Fourth is responsible for everything going absolutely pear-shaped. Okay, so, in conclusion, we're at the end, guys. The Fourth Crusade originally planned to travel to Egypt before heading to the Holy Land. The Pope and the Crusaders failed to recruit enough soldiers, leading to the Crusaders unable to fulfill their debts to the Venetians. The Venetians used this debt to reclaim the city of Zara. Alexios IV, or Prince Alexios as he was then, arrives, promising everything to all the parties could ever want: the Venetian debt paid, military support for the Crusade, and the end of the schism and submission of the Eastern Church. Alexios fails to pay up, subsequently overthrown Crusaders in their anger, sack the city. Resulting in the creation of the new Latin Empire of Constantinople, the Kingdom of Thessalonica, and the end of the Byzantine Empire for over 50 years. How do you know that time-traveling Cleo isn't responsible? I'll never tell. I'll never snitch. So yes, I have a question for you all, guys. When looking at historical events, they are often more complex than simply being able to blame someone for everything going wrong. The Fourth Crusade was a combination of unfulfilled promises, unpaid debts, and incompetent management and chaos. And so I have a question for you guys. Has your opinion of the Fourth Crusade changed? Yes, I know, Dunkslide. I have the questions later. And if you blame the Venetians prior to the stream because you had prior knowledge from other sort of sources like Wikipedia or other historians or games such as Paradox games, do you still think the blame sits on the Venetians alone? I would like you guys to give me your thoughts, guys. Hi, Soldat. Sorry. Yes. You blame everyone? I think that's fair. You didn't blame the Venetians before, but your view on it was way simpler. Quite a bit, yes. Don't really have an opinion, you only have a vague understanding of the events, yeah. Before the stream you thought all Crusades were shit, and now you think the Crusades still shit shows, yes. They were. Can't really say your opinion has changed. Your opinion on the sack of Constantinople Crusaders is still hilarious. You blame the Swedes. Yes, it's Paradox's fault. Blame the schools. You blame humanity because we like war. Yeah. You never gave much thought prior to the stream. But yeah, hopefully this has been an interesting presentation, guys. Hopefully you've learned a little something about the Fourth Crusade, the actions and motivations of everyone involved, and also the role of a historian in unpacking our historiography, discussing historiography rather, and unpacking our contemporary sources of the events, and trying to understand what happened to the best of our ability. And we have some limitations. The main limitation I've mentioned before, we don't have a Venetian perspective on the Fourth Crusade. If we did, that would help a lot. It might reshape our understanding of the event completely. Just a question, Tish. Will there be more of these? It's been hella fun to listen and learn. I do want to do more, guys. I definitely want to do more of these. It's more complicated, sure. You can't blame the Byzantines for the Fourth Crusade. No. And it is important to maybe categorize Alexios IV as separate from the rest of the Byzantines, because he was in exile for 8 years and just young, dumb, and full of unfulfilled promises. This is a whole chunk of history that you had no idea happened. You think the scholars we just got, there were some crusades and a brief description of what they had in common. Yeah, basically. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. You brushed Alexios off before because a dumb Roman emperor isn't unusual. Yeah. Lots of dumb people. It's often more material from what you've gathered. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of sources we have. I didn't mention all of them in particular, but we do have some. You've got a little question, if you don't mind. Like, did the proposed targets for Crusade usually know beforehand? No. I don't believe so. I would have to look into that, because the Crusades aren't my area of expertise. Tending to be wary of everything recorded, you're not surprised, have been educated, see other possibilities. Not that you know a lot of knowledge of this part of history, but yes. Okay. Young, dumb, and full of purple gum. Okay, so, yes. Question and answer, guys. Question and answer section. If you guys have any questions, please let me know them. Please answer them or ask them in chat now. You'll have to watch the stream from the beginning later. Next week. No, this took a lot of effort, guys. This was about 50 hours of research. This was about 50 hours of reading, constantly sort of trying to form together everything into one sort of somewhat concise retelling of our historical evidence. Is this Venetian apologia? Apologia? Not necessarily. The Venetians were responsible for their actions in the Fourth Crusade. I think attributing malice to Enrico Dandolo is disingenuous, but we can't prove or disprove it because we don't have his thoughts on the matter. We have the thoughts of people who are very upset at the Venetians, like Niketas Kanitas and his contemporaries in Constantinople, who were obviously very upset. And so our historians would parrot the words of Niketas because he was our best source for the what happened in Constantinople. What was your favorite thing about the setup and your presentation? Well, I personally enjoy the research side of it. I'm still not very confident about my teaching ability or my presenting ability for that matter. I'm used to doing it on Zoom calls in front of like 20 people. And if I have to do lectures, maybe 50 people max. So to have you guys watch in this sort of, I guess, volume, it's very nerve-wracking, especially on Twitch in a different setting. Are there sources in the Arabic world on the Fourth Crusade? Good question. Good question. Let me check. I do have in this list of sources that I have from earlier, I do have some, but I don't remember where they are in this document that I have prepared. Fuck, where is it? Here we go. Go up. Go up. Oh, wait, no, go down. Nope, that's not it. As far as I'm aware, we don't have much, because the Crusade never sort of materialized in the Arabic world. 31. Okay, no, we don't have much. We don't have much, unfortunately. Not at least, not in the stuff that I prepared. I don't have any sort of Arabic perspective. There might be some out there. I didn't obviously find it. Were the Ayyubids aware? I think they would have been aware of potential Crusader action. And it is possible that they were aware. That lends into the whole theory that the Venetians and the Ayyubids were secretly conspiring, and that's why the Crusade diverted to Constantinople. If Alexios hasn't promised the 200,000 marks and only promised the 34,000 that the Venetians were owed, would things have gone better? The thing is, we don't actually know how much Alexios ended up paying, because there are some circumstances around after the siege of Constantinople that because it was so late in the year, the Crusaders couldn't then sail to the Mediterranean, so they were stuck at Constantinople and agreed to help Alexios consolidate his power, which turned out to be somewhat disastrous for everyone involved. Had it just been the 34,000, maybe it would have been better. But also, we don't know for certain because we don't know exactly how much money they had paid back. You did a good job with this regardless. You'll find your pace, and I think you will excel at this. Thank you. Yeah. I normally don't do the big presentations. I normally do the tutorial classes, contact hours, and so yes, it's difficult to adapt to doing it on Twitch. Will you give lectures to IRL students as a VTuber? No. I'm keeping my work and VTuber activities separate. Should we email questions later if nothing pops up? You can ask them on. I guess you can ask me them via email. I do have an email on my Twitter profile. Someone asked about YouTube VODs. There is a link for the YouTube VODs. It also has my Twitter there as well. This will eventually go on YouTube, hopefully, unless something bad happens. I might need to cut down some bits, like that random person showing up from earlier. Would you like to see your notes? Yes, I'd love to see your notes. Minolinsky, thank you very much. What did I learn from pulling this together? Streaming educational content on Twitch is hard. It's very difficult. I find it much more stressful than doing it at work. And even that is still somewhat stressful. Do you have any books that you would recommend to read further on this period of history? Yes. So I would recommend, if you have an interest in history in general, where is it? Did I accidentally close it? No, I didn't. So Jonathan Phillips, Fourth Crusade, Jonathan Phillips' book was, what is it? I think it's on my throne. Let me just open my throne because I've got the title. Jonathan Phillips is one of the premier sort of Crusader historians that we have at the moment. His book, The Crusades 1095 to 1204, was very important to getting the stream done. I relied on his work a lot for getting my notes done. I also have, from a Venetian perspective, we have, oh god, let me get his full name, Thomas Madden. Thomas Madden is maybe the premier sort of Venetian scholar. He's done some work about the Fourth Crusade. Let me find it. So there's Venice, A New History, which I own. And there's also Thomas Madden, Venice and Constantinople. Enrico Dandolo and the Rise of Venice. That's a 2006 book. He's also done a lot of journal articles about the relationship between Venice and the Byzantines. If you want more stuff about diplomatic history between Venice and the Byzantines, there is also... let me find it. Because if you're not aware, guys, Venice was actually a vassal of an autonomous vassal of the Byzantines for a very long time in history. Thank you for the kind comments, Flannel Man. I don't think this was part of the Crusade. Is there any information on what was going on between the Romans and the Turks? I always struggle with that word. Is it Seljuk Turks? They were just fighting constantly. And like the Byzantine Empire fragmenting and then its restoration in a weaker form was very much the reason as to why the Sultanate of Rum could rise. If you don't know, the Sultanate of Rum gets their name from Rome. Rum is the Turkish way of saying Rome. And they did believe themselves successors of Rome. Seljuk. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Seljuk. Is there any specific reason for there not being Venetian records, or just none have been found / survived? Yep, none have been found / survived, unfortunately. Was winter really that cold to sail from Constantinople to Egypt? It's not about the temperature, although that would affect it. It's about the instability of the sea. It is exceptionally rough to sail in the Mediterranean during the winter. I would know. I have done it. It is very rough, and I've done that in a modern boat. If you imagine that in an ancient, well, not ancient, but a medieval vessel, like a galley, which sits quite low in the ocean, mind, there is a very high possibility that you sink in those unstable currents. As far as accounts go, there is someone who expects appropriate about the finances. Yeah. All the Americans tutorial. Basically, that's like the contact hours that I have with the students. Do more of these, they're fun. Thank you very much. Email, what is this, 22? Hi, Pistache. Where am I from? I'm originally from the UK / Ireland. I'm not going to be specific. I currently live in Australia. You're learning to hate time differences. I'm sorry, Salted. A for effort. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm catching up on Twitch. What else do you think of teaching in the Twitch environment? I'm enjoying it. I like the constant feedback from you guys. it is stressful. It is a lot more attention than I'm used to. Why not choose a topic you didn't need to research on? Because I don't want to get doxxed. Sorry, Nana. I don't want my background to be doxxed, because if I say, oh, I know all about this, and then you guys go, oh, hang on, Google, 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 and then there's my name. You did a very good job in educating on the subject. Granted, you knew nothing prior, but it's interesting. Thank you. Thank you. B for execution. Once the confidence sets in, this stream will be amazing. Thank you. Yes, I understand I was very nervous and a bit jittery. You don't recall any Byzantium class assigning many books. Interesting. There's a lot of sources. We have a lot of sources. Because they wrote a lot. The Greeks were very, very, very rigorous about writing historical recordings, like Conitus did. Why can I not find this gosh darn source? Sorry, I'm still looking for that that source. Oh yeah. No, that's not it. Ah, where is it? But yeah, like Venice and the Byzantines' relationship spans. By the time of the Fourth Crusade, they had a relationship of over 800 years. Their destinies were very intertwined. The Venetians basically were an autonomous vassal that helped out in times of naval conflict. They sunk a lot of Muslim fleets. They sunk a lot of like Norman invaders. Yeah, they did a lot for the Byzantines, and in exchange got a lot of trading privileges, economic privileges in Constantinople and across the empire. And the reason for like those sort of privileges that they got increased the sort of animosity between the two, because essentially the Byzantines signed away their own economy and gave it away to the Italians, including the Venetians. If you want to learn more about that, look up the gold crucible of, I think it's 1082. Not 1282, 1082. I think it was 1082. I can link it in the chat. This was very important for destabilizing the Byzantines' economy. Obviously, Wikipedia isn't the best source on it, but there you go. Who's my favorite Byzantine emperor? I don't really have one. I guess the easy answer is just to say stuff like Justinian, because he did a lot of stuff. How did the Ottomans end up replacing the Seljuks? Okay, so the Sultanate of Rum, it went into decline, and one of the emerging sort of powers from the decline of the Sultanate of Rum were the Ottoman, which is, Ottoman comes from the House of Osman. It's a corruption of, or like Latinization of Osman. As you probably know, the Ottomans were Osmanoglu. That's their dynastic name. And so, yeah. They actually, whereabouts were they? They're kind of like northwestern of Anatolia. So if you imagine Anatolia, I can actually bring it up, I suppose, in the slide. Do I have a map somewhere? Okay, so if you look here, this is about where the Ottomans first emerged, around here. And so they conquered their neighbors and very quickly grew in size, and then eventually started crossing over into they took land from the Byzantines, and then they took land from Bulgaria, and yeah, basically they just capitalized a lot on the misfortune of others. Right time, right place, right time. And they also had their own conflicts and struggles as well. Like the Timurids, for example. The Timurids beat up the Ottomans so badly that the Ottomans had a succession crisis. It's quite impressive. Yeah, they're basically a random warband in the 1200s. And they did very well for themselves. And yeah, they inherited the political apparatus of the Byzantines. Yes, they did. Oh, I'm on the wrong slide. I thought I clicked on it. There we go. This is so much more feedback than a classroom. Yes. Miss Professor Cleo, ma'am, where should you post your notes? You can post them on Discord if you'd like. If you're already on the Discord. If not, here's the link to the Discord if you would like to join. My community is very nice and kind and talks a lot about history, talks a lot about strategy games. So if those sort of things interest you, you're welcome to join. You kind of like being in chat. It helps with your attention. I'm glad. You can see how it'd be tough. Yeah, it's tough. It's surprised there were no dog interruptions. My dog was actually sleeping very soundly. And then when my roomies got back, I think about an hour or two into the stream, they took her off me. So she's with my roomies at the moment. I wish there were a lot more recorded Asian history. People respect its history. Too much liberal revisionism. Oh, okay. When he read Geoffrey Hinley's book Medieval Sieges and Siegecraft, he included a quote from Cranatus on the Second Crusade, including women in the ranks of knights and sergeants. Is there any information on women in the Fourth Crusade? So we don't have any knowledge of Crusader women. We do have women in the Crusaders' camps. And I did mention the prostitutes and other sort of camp followers. So yes, there were women, but I don't know about any fighting. Rum is in southern middle part of Turkey. Yes, I showed it on the slide briefly. So yeah, I think I'm caught up now. If you guys have any final questions, I am happy to end it here. I'll give you a few more minutes to get in any questions or any comments that you would like. Can you explain Imperial Russian fascination with the Byzantine Empire or how it came to be? Oh, so the whole concept of Moscow being Third Rome or the Russians being Third Rome, it stems from them having the same sort of religious background, because the Russians were Orthodox Christians. And so they saw themselves as, when the Ottomans took over Constantinople, they saw that as sacrilege. Because, you know, how dare the heart of the Orthodox Church be held by Ottomans? And so, yeah. Will you ever go over Genghis Khan and his reign? If people are interested in that, I'm happy to do it. Like, I don't have any plans for future educational stream concepts. But if you guys want to see more, you can suggest them on the Discord. I'm open to suggestions because I don't have any current plans for anything else. I do want to do more though, so I'm if you guys have suggestions and it interests me, then I'm willing to give it a shot. How was my day? It's been really nice. I've had a lot of fun talking about history with you guys, even though I was exceptionally nervous. But it's very hot today here. When is the Albanian 3-part history stream? Yeah, I'll do a stream on Skanderberg. Yeah, it's summer here, so it's starting to really heat up, guys. But yes, thank you so much for coming, guys. Thank you for not doing any of the TTS stuff, any of the donation stuff whilst I was teaching, or presenting rather. Thank you for holding off. I'm not saying that to try and like pressure you guys. Hey, give me money. Far be it. Like, this was completely free. I enjoyed doing it for you guys. I hope you had fun as well. Do you just do big picture history, or would you be willing to do a presentation on military history? Yeah. I don't really find interest in big history that compelling. It's because big history is its own discipline, and it covers a lot. It covers from like the Big Bang to modern day. If you're not aware of what big history is, it's a lot. So I try not to cover massive amounts of time because it just gets too overbearing, and like the stream would be days long. Do you need to submit forms? No, you can just post on the Discord. You can just post in the Discord. It was lots of fun. Thank you. Yes, thank you guys. History of Part 2. Not quite. But yes, thank you so much for coming, everyone. It's been a lot of fun. Holy shit, that's a lot of people. I had to click on the Twitch to look at who to raid, and that is a big number. Thank you so much, guys. Oh god, no, mute myself. Ah, perfect. Okay.